the ice and fire demon god of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301, Setbacks can help people move forward better. Amid the applause of the young wizards, old Barty and Ludo came to Dumbledore. After greeting the two, Dumbledore continued, "In the past few months, Mr. Bagman and Mr. Crouch have worked tirelessly to arrange the Triwizard Tournament. They will form a panel of judges with me, Professor Karkaroff and Madam Maxim, to judge the efforts of the warriors." Upon hearing the word warrior, the young wizards from the three magic schools all focus more. Dumbledore seemed to have noticed their changes, and he did not disappoint them. Instead, he smiled and said, "Mr. Filch, please bring up the box." Filch came out from a corner of the hall, holding a large wooden box inlaid with jewels in his hand. The box looked very old. The young wizards watched in a trance. They talked excitedly, and some even stood on chairs to see more clearly. Filch placed the wooden box on the table in front of him, and then cast his eyes on Dumbledore. Mr. Crouch and Mr. Bagman have carefully reviewed the specific items of the Champions competition this year, and they have made many necessary arrangements for each item. There are 3 items in total, which will be held at different times throughout the school year. They will test the champions in many different aspects, testing their magical talents, their courage and their reasoning ability, and of course, their ability to overcome danger. Dumbledore said lightly, and his tone became unusually serious at the end. Hearing Dumbledore's last words, the hall became silent, as if everyone stopped breathing. Dumbledore's eyes were calm, and he continued, "You already know that there will be 3 champions participating in the competition, each representing a participating school. We will score them according to the quality of their completion of each item. After the 3 items are completed, the champion with the highest score will win the Triwizard Cup. The champion is selected by an impartial selector, which is the Goblet of Fire." At this point, Dumbledore drew out his wand and knocked 3 times on the lid of the wooden box that Filch had placed on the table before, and the lid of the wooden box slowly opened. Dumbledore reached in and pulled out a large, roughly carved wooden goblet. The goblet itself was not very impressive, but it was filled with dancing blue-white flames. Obviously, this goblet was the legendary Goblet of Fire. Looking at the Goblet of Fire in the distance, Lin put his left hand over his eyes, a golden light flashed, and 2 golden films appeared in front of Lin's pupils. Lin was still using the secret method taught to him by Nicholas Flamel, but this time he was not using this secret method on the alchemical creation itself, but on himself. Looking through the golden film that appeared in front of his pupils, the countless alchemical arrays contained in the Goblet of Fire emerged one after another, and Lin could see them all at a glance. But in the eyes of other wizards, the Goblet of Fire was still that ordinary wooden cup, without any changes. From the alchemical array that the Goblet of Fire manifested in Lin En's vision, Lin En could distinguish the ancient alchemical arrays that belonged to the Goblet of Fire itself, as well as the restrictions from Dumbledore that seemed to have been added not long ago. In front of the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore closed the wooden box that originally contained the Goblet of Fire, and placed the Goblet of Fire on the lid of the wooden box, so that everyone in the hall could see it clearly. Dumbledore simply announced the rules for selecting the warriors of each magic school. Every student who wants to run for the champion must write his name and school name on a piece of parchment and throw it into the Goblet of Fire. Those who aspire to become a champion can sign up within 24 hours. Tomorrow night, which is Halloween night, the Goblet of Fire will select the 3 students it thinks can best represent the 3 magic schools. Tonight, the Goblet of Fire will be placed in the entrance hall, and all students who are willing to run for the election will be able to touch it. However, in order to prevent students who are not old enough from succumbing to the temptation and secretly putting their names into the Goblet of Fire, I will draw an age line around the Goblet of Fire after it is placed in the entrance hall. No one under the age of 17 can cross this age line. Finally, I would like to remind every student who wants to run for the election that this Triwizard Tournament is not a joke and you must not participate rashly. Once a warrior is selected by the Goblet of Fire, he must persist in the competition to the end. When you cast your name into the cup, you actually form a magical contract that must be observed. Once you become a warrior, you are not allowed to change your mind. Therefore, please think twice and make sure that you really want to participate in the competition before casting your name into the cup. Well, I think it's time for everyone to go to bed. Good night. Dumbledore announced solemnly. After announcing all the rules, Dumbledore smiled again and said to all the young wizards. Listening to Dumbledore's words, Lin smiled slightly. The age line in Dumbledore's words is actually just a trick. The real restriction is not in this so-called age line, but in the alchemical restriction inside the Goblet of Fire. If Lin guessed correctly, the so-called age line is just a golden coil drawn with golden chalk, and some magic is added to make the golden coil shine, to achieve the effect of deceiving people. Age line. Fred said in surprise at the Gryffindor table, his eyes sparkling. That's easy. It will definitely be fooled by the aging potion, right? As long as your name is in that cup, you can smile happily. It can't tell who is over 17 and who is under 17. Although Fred has entered the threshold of alchemy and is considered a formal alchemist, he can't see the essence of the alchemy array in the Goblet of Fire through its appearance, so he can't imagine that the real restriction lies in the alchemy array of the Goblet of Fire. At this time, many young wizards have stood up and left the hall and walked towards the entrance hall. Lin, who was walking from not far away, looked at Fred with pity, but he didn't intend to remind him. After all, as an alchemist, being able to perceive the existence of the alchemy array is the most basic quality. Even though the Goblet of Fire itself is an alchemical creation that can well cover up the fluctuations of the alchemical array of the ban imposed by Dumbledore, Fred, as an alchemist, has no awareness of linking it with alchemy, which is wrong. However, with the intelligence of the Weirlight twins, after Dumbledore's ban takes effect on the two of them, they will surely be able to distinguish that it is the power of alchemy with their keen insight. In some cases, some setbacks are necessary, which can make people move forward better. Chapter 302. The one I'm attracted to is you. I'm leaving first. See you tomorrow. After arriving at the entrance hall, Fleur waved to Lin and left alone. After watching Fleur leave, Lin walked towards the Slytherin common room. Tomorrow night would be the time to reveal the candidate given by the Goblet of Fire, which meant that he only had this one night to break the alchemical restriction on the Goblet of Fire. Instead of waiting here foolishly for the other little wizards to leave, it would be better to go back to the dormitory to rest and recuperate, and then break the alchemical restriction on the Goblet of Fire when it was late at night. However, just as Lin was about to leave, another snow-white figure blocked Lin's way. Irina crossed her arms and angrily looked at Lin En, who was half a head taller than her, and asked, "Tell me, when did you hook up with her?" Irina was referring to Fleur. Although she knew that she was not accusing the other party, after seeing her sitting with Fleur, she felt a sinking feeling in her heart for no reason, which made her want to find Lin En to ask for clarification. "Irina, you misunderstood. During the summer vacation of my first grade, my teacher took me to visit his alma mater, Bogsburton School of Magic. At that time, Madame Maxim asked Fleur to receive us. I took the opportunity to discuss alchemy with her. She came to discuss alchemy with me. We only met once." Lin En explained helplessly to the petite girl in front of him. For some reason, he always felt that the other party seemed to be afraid of something. Just a once-time encounter? Irina secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She stared at Lin En's dark red eyes. She knew that she had misunderstood, but the breath she held in her heart made her involuntarily retort, "So, you were already in love with her before you met me?" After saying this misleading sentence, Irina suddenly wanted to slap herself, but she seemed to have thought of something, and the whole person suddenly became nervous, waiting for the other party's answer. Hearing Irina's words, Lin En's expression became more helpless. He understood that what happened at the previous dinner seemed to make Irina misunderstand something. Lin En said, like coaxing a child, "Don't worry, I don't have any thoughts about her. I'm not a person who is tempted by beauty." Hearing this, Irina felt much more comfortable, but she still curled her lips on the surface and whispered, "Who knows?" But just when Irina was about to say something else, she found that her shoulders were suddenly grabbed by Lin En. She trembled and raised her head, but saw the smile hanging on the corner of Lin En's mouth. Lin En came closer, pressed his forehead against Irina's, and whispered, "If you think so, then you can treat me as you are, but I'm attracted to you." A stream of hot air blew on Irina's face, making her feel itchy. She felt like she was under a spell, and her whole body became a little soft. She looked at Lin En, who was so close, but it was as if she saw a demon with bared fangs and claws, and she was the little cat that was about to be devoured by the demon. Ah! Irina's pretty face was as red as an apple, and her face suddenly became hot. She screamed, broke free from Lin En's hands on her shoulders, and turned and ran away. Looking at Irina's departing back, Lin En felt inexplicably disappointed, but he said unforgivingly, "Ah, little girls just can't help being teased." However, Lin En's disappointment did not last too long. After all, his remarks were too sudden, so that Irina did not have any time to prepare herself mentally. It was normal for Irina not to respond directly to him. Lin En adjusted his mentality and walked towards the Slytherin dormitory. There was still a tough battle to fight tonight, and he could not afford to be careless. Soon, it was late at night, and the blue-white flame flickered in the dim hallway, as frightening as a ghost fire. There was no one in the silent hallway. Even the most patient little wizard should go back to rest at this point. But at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the goblet of fire. The owner of this figure was Lin En. After a short rest and replenishing his energy, he quietly left the dormitory and came to the hallway. Lin En gently waved his right hand holding the magic wand, and with a flash of golden light, countless golden magic arrays emerged from the surface of the goblet of fire. Looking at the dense patterns that would stop most alchemists in their tracks, Lin En smiled and prepared to break the alchemical restrictions. However, just as Lin En was about to start, a hint of vigilance suddenly appeared in his eyes. He turned around in an instant, pointed his magic wand at the air several meters away, and shouted, "Who is it?" "It's me." A crisp voice sounded, and Irina's figure appeared in the hallway. After confirming Irina's identity, Lin En put down his wand and asked in confusion, "Why are you here too?" Irina explained, "Don't forget, little Barty is also going to do something to the goblet of fire. I'm afraid that, if you accidentally run into him, he will harm you. Anyway, I can't sleep, so I might as well come to protect you." Irina looked like she was talking about the matter, as if her shy departure had never happened. Lin En's heart warmed up. He naturally didn't believe that the other party came because she couldn't sleep. Looking at Irina's well-prepared appearance, she must have planned it in advance. "Okay, then my safety is in your hands," Lin En said with a smile. His voice was very light, but it was full of trust. Irina didn't say anything. As she waved her wand, ice blue light flew out from the top of her wand and fell into the corners of the hallway. Seeing this, Lin En turned his attention back to the goblet of fire. He quickly analyzed the newly added alchemical arrays by Dumbledore and tried to crack them by reverse analysis. As early as after the dinner, when Dumbledore took out the goblet of fire, Lin En had already seen these alchemical arrays, and in the following period of time, Lin En also had some of his own insights and analysis on these alchemical arrays. Now that it was time for formal practice, Lin En would naturally not be timid. As the wand waved, golden light intertwined on the alchemical arrays on the surface of the goblet of fire. The light emitted by the alchemical arrays dimmed, and the alchemical arrays dissipated under Lin En's control after he seized control through a reverse analysis. The process of breaking the ban is like defusing a bomb. It does not allow any distraction or any mistakes. Looking at Lin En, who was concentrating on breaking the alchemical ban on the goblet of fire, Irina could not take her eyes away. Lin En's serious look made people sink into it. "Please give me rewards and monthly tickets." Chapter 303, Alchemical Restriction and the Intrusion of Barty Crouch Jr. Chapter 303, Alchemical Restrictions and the Intrusion of Barty Crouch Jr. Time passed by minute, and golden threads were extracted by Lin En from the alchemical restrictions on the goblet of fire, dissipating in the air. The alchemical arrays that turned into restrictions continued to decrease under Lin En's analysis, and fine sweat covered Lin En's forehead. These alchemical arrays were not that difficult for Lin En, but they were also not as simple as he imagined. Although each of these alchemical arrays was easy to break, it was unexpectedly difficult to break the restrictions formed by these alchemical arrays. Lin En must break these alchemical arrays one by one in a certain order. If the order is wrong, the previously dissipated all-chemical arrays will be restored to their original state under the resonance of other all-chemical arrays, causing Lin En's efforts to go to waste. However, compared with bomb disposal, this can be said to be as simple as it can be. After all, if Lin En fails to break the alchemy array, at most he will start over, but if the bomb disposal personnel fail to dismantle the bomb, they will be shattered to pieces and their bodies will be gone under the explosion of the bomb. Obviously, this is Dumbledore's test of Lin En. He not only tests Lin En's alchemy level, but also tests Lin En's patience and perseverance. In the long process of analyzing the alchemy array, Lin En made 2 mistakes and chose the wrong order to break the alchemy array, which made him start over twice in a row. But Lin En was not discouraged at all. He just combined the experience of the previous 2 failures and seriously broke the alchemy ban made by Dumbledore. At the entrance of the hallway, Irina was watching Lin En's movements, but at this moment, she suddenly looked outside the hallway vigilantly. The ice power she released earlier told her that someone had come here. Irina raised her wand and pointed the tip of the wand outside the hallway. No matter who came, she would not allow the other party to disturb Lin's alchemy. Lol, it's so late. What are you doing here? A scarred figure appeared not far from Irina, and an eyeball that was obviously an all-chemical creation was spinning wildly in one of the other's eye sockets. The person who came was Professor Moody, or rather, Barty Crouch Jr. After seeing Irina appear alone at the entrance of the hall, Barty Crouch Jr. couldn't help but have a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. You know, it was this little witch who killed dozens of their Death Eaters on the night of the Quidditch World Cup and sent the remaining living Death Eaters to Azkaban prison. If the master is resurrected but can't see his servants, how sad he will be. Thinking of this, the murderous intent in Barty Crouch Jr.'s eyes became stronger. Irina stood at the entrance of the hallway, blocking the other party's view of the Goblet of Fire. She took the initiative and said, Professor Moody came here late at night. Could he be planning to do something to the Goblet of Fire? Professor Moody was speechless for a moment. It was indeed his plan to cast the confounding charm on the Goblet of Fire and put Harry Potter's name into it. His plan was revealed by Irina, and he was unable to refute the other party's words for a while. Professor Moody looked uncertain. He said coldly, you slandered the professor in person. Gryffindor will deduct 10 points. Lol, you have no right to ask about the actions of a professor. Instead, you did not sleep at night and went out for a night walk, which violated the school rules of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. For this, Gryffindor will deduct another 50 points. Hearing this, Irina chuckled and said, sorry, Professor Moody, I don't think you can deduct my points yet. Because the reason I'm here is because of Professor Dumbledore's order. This is a note Professor Dumbledore gave me. As she said this, Irina handed a piece of parchment to Professor Moody. Professor Moody looked down and saw a line of text. Student Irina Lowell is hereby allowed to leave the dormitory after curfew, move freely within the castle, and complete the tasks issued by me. And at the end of this line of text, it was Dumbledore's signature. As early as after Lin and Irina reached a cooperation with Dumbledore, they asked Dumbledore for a note that allowed them to move freely within the castle during the curfew. Lin and Irina both knew that a higher ranking official could crush a person. Now Barty Jr. was using the identity of Professor Moody while they were just ordinary students. In order to prevent Barty Jr. from using the identity of a professor to force them, they naturally had to use Dumbledore's identity as a backer. After all, no matter how powerful a professor is, he is not as good as the principal, right? Exclamation mark. After reading Dumbledore's note, Professor Moody's face became even uglier, but he couldn't openly oppose Dumbledore, lest he reveal his flaws. So, he hummed and said, I'll leave this note here first, and I'll talk to Dumbledore. After saying this, Professor Moody limped away again. Irina did not stop Professor Moody from taking the note away. To be on the safe side, she and Lin En prepared hundreds of identical notes. Even if they met other professors later, they could easily take out the notes to deal with them. After 3 or 4 hours, the sky outside the castle was already dawning. Finally done. Lin En wiped the sweat from his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. The alchemical arrays on the Goblet of Fire in front of him now belonged to the Goblet of Fire itself, and the alchemical restrictions set by Dumbledore were completely destroyed after Lin En spent a whole night to crack them. After breaking the alchemical restrictions on the Goblet of Fire, Lin En quickly took out a piece of parchment from his pocket, wrote his name and the full name of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry on it, and threw it into the Goblet of Fire that was emitting blue and white flames. The blue-white flame immediately devoured the note that Lin En had thrown in. Lin En waited for a while, and after making sure that there was no problem, he stepped forward again. As he waved the magic wand in his hand, golden threads spewed out. In the process of analyzing the alchemical restriction previously, Lin En had already mastered the refining techniques of this alchemical restriction. Since he had already thrown his name in, for the sake of the safety of his classmates, he naturally had to reattach the restriction to the Goblet of Fire. Compared with the fact that there could not be any mistakes when breaking the alchemical restriction, reattaching the alchemical restriction to the Goblet of Fire was just a process of superimposing the alchemical array layer by layer. In less than 10 minutes, Lin En reattached the alchemical restriction that he had spent a whole night breaking to the Goblet of Fire. After doing all this, Lin En turned around and looked at Irina, who was already very sleepy and yawning, but still staring at him with bloodshot eyes to protect him. Lin En's eyes were full of tenderness. He came to Irina, rubbed her head with his hand, and said softly, "Let's go. We can go back and rest." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, The Goblet of Fire Warrior. Facing Lin's head patting, Irina, who was already very sleepy, did not react. Her eyes looked like they might close at any time. After learning that she could go back to rest, Irina said HMM softly like a kitten, and then she relaxed. She yawned and staggered towards the Gryffindor common room. Lin looked at Irina worriedly, who might fall to the ground at any time. He followed Irina without any hesitation, and after sending her back to the Gryffindor common room, he returned to the Slytherin common room alone to rest. It was not until the two of them left the hallway that Professor Moody appeared in the hallway again. He glanced at the direction where Lin En and Irina left with resentment, and cursed in a low voice, "Damn Dumbledore, he actually asked two little wizards to protect the Goblet of Fire." Fortunately, these two damn little wizards were lazy and left before the breakfast started. Otherwise, when others got up, I'm afraid I wouldn't have the chance to tamper with the Goblet of Fire. Lin En and Irina left in the early morning, less than 2 hours before the breakfast at the castle began. In addition, the two stayed here all night, and Irina stood at the entrance of the hall without moving. This inevitably made Professor Moody misunderstand that the two were helpers sent by Dumbledore to guard the Goblet of Fire. Little did he know that Lin En and Irina were actually here to tamper with the Goblet of Fire. Professor Moody quickly crossed the age line and came to the Goblet of Fire. He waved his wand and cast a powerful confusion charm on the Goblet of Fire, and then threw a piece of parchment with the name Harry Potter written on it, but without the name of the school, into the Goblet of Fire. Under the effect of the confusion charm, the Goblet of Fire not only did not spit out the parchment, but also directly identified the Harry Potter in the parchment without the full name of the school as the fourth warrior of the non-existent magic school. As soon as Lin and Irina returned to their respective dormitories, they fell asleep. They slept until the night of that day, and then they got up from the bed in high spirits. During the time they spent in sleep, Fred and George tried to cross the age line with the aging potion during the day, but were bounced out by a magic power, and their chins were covered with long white beards. They had to go to the school hospital to find Madame Pomfrey for treatment. However, after being backfired by the ban, they also realized that it was not a magical ban, but an alchemical ban. Therefore, the aging potion that could deceive magic had no effect on the alchemical ban. After learning this, they secretly cursed Dumbledore's cunning. When Lin and Irina walked into the candlelit auditorium, the auditorium was almost full of people. The Goblet of Fire, which was originally placed in the entrance hall, has been moved and placed in front of Dumbledore's empty chair at the teacher's table. The Halloween dinner lasted much longer than usual, but perhaps because it was a banquet comparable to the 4 major dinners at Hogwarts for 2 consecutive days, the little wizards did not seem to like the carefully prepared sumptuous dishes as usual. It has been mentioned many times before that the opening dinner, Halloween dinner, Christmas dinner and year-end dinner at Hogwarts Castle every year always have many delicious foods that make people linger. So these 4 major dinners are also the dinners that the little wizards look forward to most every year. However, at today's Halloween dinner, the little wizards kept looking forward to it, and each of them showed an anxious expression on their faces. They were all restless and stood up from time to see if Dumbledore had finished eating. When the golden plate returned to its original spotless state, the voices in the hall suddenly increased a lot, and the little wizards all showed excited eyes and began to make a fuss. But then, after Dumbledore stood up, the hall became silent again. Karkaroff and Madame Maxim, standing on both sides of Dumbledore, looked as nervous and expectant as the little wizards in the audience. Ludo Bagman was smiling, and he winked at the little wizards from various schools, while old Barty Crouch looked uninterested, and even a little bored. Old Barty, who was used to silence, did not like the feeling of standing in front of these noisy little wizards. At this time, Dumbledore spoke slowly. Okay, the Goblet of Fire is about to make a decision. Listen, when the name of the champion is announced by the Goblet of Fire, I want them to walk to the top of the hall, then walk along the teacher's seat, and enter the next room, where they will receive preliminary guidance. As he said this, he pointed to the door behind the teacher's seat. After saying this, Dumbledore waved his wand vigorously. Then, except for the candles and the pumpkin lanterns, all the other candles went out, and the hall suddenly fell into a state of semi-light and semi-darkness. The blue-white flame from the Goblet of Fire burst into a dazzling light, brighter than anything else in the entire hall. The blue-white flame with sparks was even a little dazzling. After a while, the flame in the Goblet of Fire suddenly turned red again, and a large number of sparks splashed out. Then, a tongue of fire jumped into the air, and a piece of burnt parchment flew out of it. After seeing this parchment, everyone in the hall held their breath. Dumbledore took the parchment, and after seeing the name written on it clearly, he said in a clear and powerful tone, "The champion of Durmstrang School of Wizardry is Victor Krum." At this time, applause and cheers swept the entire hall, and Ron shouted loudly, not surprising at all. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Krum stood up from the Slytherin table. He walked towards Dumbledore listlessly, and after coming in front of Dumbledore, he turned right, walked forward in the direction of the teacher's seats, and entered the next room through the door that Dumbledore mentioned. "Great, Victor!" Karkaroff shouted at Dumbledore's side. Although the applause in the hall was loud, people could still hear his voice. "I know you are destined to be the champion." After a while, the applause and conversation gradually subsided, and people's attention was focused on the Goblet of Fire again. After a few seconds, the flame turned red again, and the second parchment jumped out of the cup under the push of the flame. Dumbledore announced loudly, "The champion of Bogsburton's School of Magic is Fleur Delacour." Fleur, who was sitting not far from Lin like last night, stood up. She smiled at Lin, and then walked towards Dumbledore. Chapter 305 You can only blame your incompetence. "Oh, Irina, look, they all seem very disappointed." Hermione, who was sitting next to Irina, said so amid the noise, looking at the little wizards of Bogsburton's School of Magic and Wizardry sitting at the long table of Ravenclaw. In fact, the word disappointed was too light. After learning that Fleur was chosen, 2 little witches of Bogsburton's School of Magic and Wizardry who were not selected burst into tears, buried their heads in their arms, and cried sadly. Since the Goblet of Fire chose Fleur, it means that Fleur is the most suitable little witch to be a warrior in Bogsburton's School of Magic and Wizardry. How can those little witches who claim to be much stronger than Half-Blood Veela accept this? Exclamation mark. After Fleur also entered the next room, the hall became quiet again, and this time the silence was filled with a strong excitement that could be tasted, because the next parchment to be drawn will have the name of the warrior of Hogwarts School of Magic and Wizardry. At this time, the Goblet of Fire turned red again, sparks flew, and the flames jumped high into the air. Dumbledore pulled out the third parchment from the tip of the flames. After seeing the name written on the parchment, Dumbledore's eyes flashed with relief, and he said loudly, "The champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Lin Rowell." As Dumbledore's voice fell, the sound that burst out almost blew off the ceiling of the auditorium. Compared with the applause and cheers in the auditorium, there were many more exclamations from the little wizards. Most of the little wizards clearly remembered that Lin was not even 17 years old. He was just a 5th grade little wizard. How could he cross the age line set by Dumbledore himself and put his name into the Goblet of Fire? Exclamation mark. The shady deal. Raoul is only in the 5th grade. He can't be a champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. A little lion of Gryffindor shouted. Gryffindor and Slytherin are in opposition in most cases. Partnerships like Lin and Irina, where one is in Slytherin and the other is in Gryffindor, are rare. Most of the young wizards in these two academies will subconsciously hate each other. Therefore, even though Lin was a hero who had repelled Voldemort's remnant soul, killed the 1000-year-old basilisk, and saved Hogwarts Castle, it was inevitable that some Gryffindor little lions would be hostile to him. Of course, under the influence of what Lin has done over the years, many Gryffindor little lions in the 2nd grade and above have goodwill towards Lin. There are not too many little lions like the one who just shouted against Lin, but many 7th grade little wizards who think they can become warriors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry are fighting for themselves at this time. That's right, this is definitely a shady deal. I don't accept it. Luor is under 17 years old. How can he be selected by the Goblet of Fire? We strongly demand that Luor be disqualified from participating in the Triwizard Tournament, and that the champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry be re-elected. These 7th year wizards who cast their names into the Goblet of Fire were all speaking loudly, expressing their dissatisfaction. At this time, Lin En had stood up from his seat, walked in front of Dumbledore, and stood on the podium. However, Lin En did not walk towards the door leading to the next room, but turned around, and his cold eyes swept over the 7th year wizards who opposed him one by one. Lin En said calmly, "Perhaps you have long forgotten that when Professor Dumbledore announced the Triwizard Tournament, he said, unless you are strong enough to break the magic I set. This also means that, if I can break the age limit set by Dumbledore for the Goblet of Fire and throw my name into the Goblet of Fire, then my behavior is in accordance with the rules. Since it is in accordance with the rules for me to throw my name into the Goblet of Fire, then the selection of the Goblet of Fire is a normal survival of the fittest, and there is no so-called shady talk. If you throw your name into the Goblet of Fire, but are not selected by the Goblet of Fire, maybe it's just because you are not as good as me." Lin En said so, and at the end of his speech, he chuckled. His contemptuous eyes made many 7th grade wizards look livid. However, those 7th grade wizards had to admit that Lin En was right. After all, if what Lin En did was really in accordance with the rules, then the Goblet of Fire did not choose them, because they were indeed inferior to others. After Lin finished speaking, Dumbledore smiled and clapped his hands, which was considered to support Lin's words. So, Lin did not stay here for too long. He winked at Irina at the Gryffindor table, and then walked into the next room through the door. After Lin left, Dumbledore looked at the young wizards below. However, just as he was about to announce the end of the selection of the champions of the Triwizard Tournament, the blue-white flame in the Goblet of Fire turned red again, accompanied by the crackling of sparks, and a long tongue of fire suddenly jumped into the air, holding up another piece of parchment. Dumbledore seemed to subconsciously stretch out a slender hand, and grabbed the parchment, staring at the name written on it. In the suddenly silent hall, Dumbledore stared at the note in his hand, and everyone in the hall stared at Dumbledore. After a while, Dumbledore cleared his throat and read loudly, "Harry Potter." In the next room, after seeing Lin coming, Crumb just nodded to him, and Fleur, who knew Lin's age, exclaimed, "Oh my god, Lin, why are you here? Didn't Professor Dumbledore say that only young wizards who are 17 years old can participate in the Triwizard Tournament?" Hearing Fleur's words, Crumb looked sideways in surprise. Lin explained, "I broke the age limit set by Professor Dumbledore, cast my name into the Goblet of Fire, and then I was chosen. Professor Dumbledore once said this, so it is in accordance with the rules." Fleur's eyes sparkled. She said in surprise, "I didn't expect you to be able to break the ban set by Professor Dumbledore, the greatest white wizard of this century. You are really amazing." Hearing this, Lin chuckled and said, "If you have felt that ban, then you should be able to perceive that it is not a magical ban, but an alchemical ban. You should understand who my master is, right?" Hearing Lin's words, Fleur suddenly realized that of course she knew who Lin's master was, Nicholas Flamel, the recognized great alchemist. If even Nicholas Flamel's apprentice could not break this ban, then she really couldn't think of any other little wizard in Hogwarts Castle who could break the alchemical ban set by Dumbledore. While Lin was talking to Fleur, the door opened again, and Harry walked in dazed. Chapter 306 Karkaroff is questioned. Fleur looked at Harry who had come in and asked, "What's wrong? Do they want us to go back to the Great Hall?" Fleur thought Harry was just sent to pass on the message, and she didn't think of Harry as the 4th champion at all. Lin, who knew the truth, smiled at Harry and stepped aside to make room for him. Unlike his own method of breaking the ban and throwing the parchment, Barty Jr. directly used the confusion charm on the Goblet of Fire to identify Harry as the champion of the 4th magic school. Otherwise, with Harry's own ability alone, even if he broke through the age limit and competed with them, Harry would never be able to become the champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Although Lin could use the same method to make herself the 5th champion, the fact that Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry had 2 champions had already made Madame Maxim and Karkaroff very dissatisfied. If Lin becomes the 5th champion, and the number of champions at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is more than the other 2 schools combined, then it would be a small matter for Madame Maxim and Karkaroff to withdraw from the competition out of anger. But if it affects their plan against Voldemort, then things will get out of hand. Therefore, Lin chose to replace Cedric as the champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Although this is a bit unfair to Cedric, in this way he can save the other party's life and keep his plan intact. Why not do it? Exclamation mark. Before Harry could answer Fleur's question, the door was opened again, and a flurry of footsteps came. Ludo Bagman walked into the room, grabbed Harry's arm, and pulled him forward, muttering in a low voice, "This is too bizarre. Absolutely too bizarre. Gentlemen and ladies, please allow me to introduce, although it seems incredible, this is the 4th champion of the Triwizard Tournament." As Ludo spoke, he led Harry to the fire, turned around and said to Lin and the others. Hearing this, Crumb straightened up and looked Harry up and down. Obviously, he did not think Harry had the qualities of a champion of the Triwizard Tournament. Fleur retorted, "This is obviously a mistake. He can't participate in the competition. He is too young." Ludo rubbed his smooth chin, lowered his head, looked at Harry with a smile, and said, "This is indeed surprising, but, as you know, the age limit is only implemented this year as an additional safety measure. Now that his name has been sprayed out of the Goblet of Fire, I think that, since it has come to this, it is not allowed to escape. The rules are very clear, you must abide by them. Harry must do his best." Before Ludo finished speaking, the door behind them was pushed open again, and a large group of people rushed in. The first one to bear the brunt was Dumbledore, followed by old Barty Crouch, Karkaroff, Madame Maxim, Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape. Before Professor McGonagall closed the door, the few people could hear the discussions of thousands of young wizards in the hall next door. After the room returned to silence, Madame Maxim asked Dumbledore, "What does this mean, Dumbledore? I want to know that too, Dumbledore," Karkaroff said, with a cold smile on his face, his icy blue eyes emitting a hint of coldness. "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry has 2 warriors? I don't remember anyone telling me that the host school can have 2 warriors. Haven't I read the regulations carefully enough?" As he said that, Karkaroff sneered briefly, and his laughter was very unpleasant. "That's impossible," said Madame Maxim, placing her hand on Fleur's shoulder. "It's extremely unfair that Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry can't have 2 champions." Karkaroff still had that cold smile on his face, and the chill in his eyes deepened. He said coldly, "First it was Lin Rowe, and now it's Harry Potter. In our impression, your age line can exclude underage competitors, Dumbledore. Otherwise, we would definitely bring more candidates from our school." Dumbledore replied, "When I announced the rules, I said that, if they can break the ban I set, then I will not stop them from signing up for the Goblet of Fire. Obviously, Lin has successfully broken my ban, which means that his participation does not violate the rules." Hearing this, Madame Maxim glanced at Lin. Of course, she remembered that Lin was the little wizard who followed his teacher, Wallace and Green, to visit his alma mater 3 years ago. If it was him, he might really have the ability to break the alchemical ban set by Dumbledore. As the principal of Bogsburton's School of Magic, a magic school that attaches great importance to alchemy, Madame Maxim could naturally see that the restriction set on the Goblet of Fire was an alchemical restriction. Considering the identity of Lin's teacher and master, it was not surprising to her that Lin could break the alchemical restriction. Thinking of this, Madame Maxim signaled to Karkaroff with her eyes, indicating that there was no problem with Lin's participation in the competition. Then, what about this Harry Potter? I don't think this 4th year wizard has the ability to break your restriction, or in other words, has your magical power declined to the point where you can easily defeat even a 4th year wizard? Karkaroff said with a mocking tone, looking directly into Dumbledore's eyes, not giving in. Hearing Karkaroff's words, Dumbledore fell silent. But at this moment, Lin stood up, glanced at Harry beside him, and then said to Karkaroff in a dignified manner, Principal Karkaroff, if your magic level is not a problem, I think you should be able to tell that Harry's name was cast into the Goblet of Fire, not by my method, right? Even if Harry broke Dumbledore's alchemical ban, he could only cast his own name into the Goblet of Fire and compete with us, but could not become the 4th champion. Karkaroff's face darkened when Lin questioned his magic level, but Lin's words did make him unable to refute. At this time, Madame Maxim smiled gently at Lin. She still had a good impression of this disciple of Wallison. She asked, so, Lin, in your opinion, how did he cast his own name into the Goblet of Fire and become the 4th champion? Chapter 307, Old Barty under the Imperious Curse. Not only Madame Maxim, but also Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape and even Harry himself, all looked at Lin curiously, waiting for Lin's next words. Lin had no intention of keeping everyone on suspense, so he expressed his thoughts. Since Harry has become the 4th champion, it means that the Goblet of Fire has identified Harry as the only student who has registered for the 4th non-existent magic school. I'm sure everyone has guessed what magic can do this. After hearing Lin's words, the name of a spell appeared in the minds of everyone present except Harry, and Fleur exclaimed, Lin, are you talking about the confusion spell? Lin nodded slightly and said, yes, I'm afraid only a powerful confusion spell can achieve this goal. And Harry obviously does not have the ability to cast a powerful confusion spell. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall frowned and asked, Lin, you mean, there is a wizard with a powerful magic level who cast Harry's name into the Goblet of Fire, but why did that person do that? What good does it do to that person? Lin chuckled and said, obviously, that person wants Harry to die. He hopes that Harry will die in this extremely dangerous Triwizard tournament. As Lin finished speaking, Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape and Harry all broke out in a cold sweat, and Harry felt a chill on his spine. He felt as if everything around him had become unsafe. Fleur looked at Lin in horror. She knew that Lin must have a basis for saying this, which made her think about it with great fear. Clap, clap, clap. At this time, Dumbledore clapped his hands gently. He looked at Lin with a smile, and was obviously very satisfied with Lin's analysis. Dumbledore cleared his throat and said, I think Harry needs to participate in the Triwizard tournament. As for the purpose of the person who threw the parchment into the Goblet of Fire, as long as we can ensure the safety of the champion, then the other party's plan will naturally fail, right? Harry looked at Dumbledore in disbelief. Someone was trying to murder him, but the other party wanted him to participate in this meaningless Triwizard tournament? Exclamation mark. After learning that Harry was still going to participate in the Triwizard tournament, Karkaroff's expression became even more unpleasant. He stretched out his voice, Mr. Crouch, Mr. Bagman, you two are our, objective referees. You must also think that this matter is extremely inappropriate, right? Ludo wiped his face with a handkerchief and turned to look at Old Barty. Old Barty looked at Karkaroff coldly and said lightly, we must abide by the regulations. The regulations clearly stipulate that anyone whose name is sprayed out of the Goblet of Fire must participate in the Triwizard tournament. Hey, Old Barty knows the regulations by heart. Ludo laughed loudly, and a smile broke out on his face. He turned his head and looked at Karkaroff and Ms. Maxim, as if the matter had been resolved satisfactorily. I insist that my other students re-register, Karkaroff said, with an extremely ugly expression on his face. You must put out the goblet of fire again, and we have to keep adding names to it until each school produces 2 champions. This is fair, Dumbledore. Ludo hurriedly said. Karkaroff, I'm afraid that won't work. The goblet of fire has just been extinguished. It won't be rekindled until the next Triwizard tournament. Before Ludo could finish his words, Karkaroff interrupted him angrily. Drumstrength's School of Magic will never participate in the next Triwizard tournament. We have held so many meetings and gone through so many negotiations and consultations, but we didn't expect something like this to happen. I just want to leave now. It's an empty threat, Karkaroff. At this moment, a roaring voice came from outside the door. You can't leave your champion now. He must participate in the competition. They all must participate. As Dumbledore said, this is bound by a magical contract. This is good for you, isn't it? Professor Moody walked into the room, limping towards the fire. Every time his metal right foot landed, it made a loud thumping sound. Professor Moody seemed to be talking to Karkaroff, but his cold eyes swept over Lin. He never expected that Lin and Irina were not helping Dumbledore guard the Goblet of Fire last night, but wanted to tamper with the Goblet of Fire like him. Moreover, the other party spent an entire night, which made him wait bitterly outside the hallway with the disillusionment charm for an entire night. Thinking of his nose running due to the cold wind last night, Professor Moody was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. I don't understand what you mean, Moody, Karkaroff said coldly. If this is good for me, I won't oppose it. Professor Moody sneered and said, really? This is very simple, Karkaroff. Someone put Potter's name in the Goblet of Fire, and he knew that if the name was sprayed out by the Goblet of Fire, Potter would have to participate in the competition. Maybe someone hopes that Potter will die for this. At the end, Professor Moody almost roared. However, Professor Moody unexpectedly found that his words did not cause any violent emotional fluctuations in anyone. Even Harry, who was believed to be wanted to kill him, looked at him calmly. Just when Professor Moody was puzzled by this, Karkaroff said lightly, Moody, I think you are really old. Even a 5th year wizard can say these, but you are proud of knowing some well-known things. Karkaroff nodded to Lin. After learning that Lin had said what he wanted to say, Professor Moody looked at Lin in surprise, and then he wanted to speak again, to guide everyone to think in the direction of conspiracy theory. But at this moment, Dumbledore spoke again. He looked at everyone in the room and said, we don't know how this situation came about, but in my opinion, we have no choice but to accept it. Lin and Harry were both selected to participate in the competition, so they must. Madame Maxim wanted to raise an objection. But, Dumbledore. My dear Madame Maxim, if you have another solution, I'm willing to listen to it. Dumbledore said calmly. Okay, let's continue. Ludo said so. He rubbed his hands and looked at the people in the room with a smile. We are going to guide the warriors, right? Old Barty, you tell it? Hearing Ludo's voice, Old Barty shook his body. He seemed to suddenly wake up from his meditation. Seeing this scene, Lin's face sank. He could naturally see that something was wrong with Old Barty. It seems that Old Barty has been under the imperious curse of Little Barty since this time. Chapter 308. Shut up. Okay, Old Barty said in a deep voice. Guidance, yes, the first project. As he spoke, he took a few steps forward and walked into the circle of light of the fire. In the light of the fire, Lin could see that Old Barty's face looked very haggard at this moment. There were 2 deep shadows under his eyes, and his wrinkled skin was as white and transparent as paper. He was completely different from him on the night of the Quidditch World Cup. Old Barty looked at Lin and the other 3 and said, the first project is to test your courage, so we are not going to tell you what it is. The courage to face the unknown is an important quality of a wizard, very important. The first project will be carried out on November 24th, and will be completed in front of other students and the judges. When completing the competition projects, warriors must not request or accept any help from their teachers. When facing the first round of challenges, the only weapon in their hands is their own wand. They will not learn about the second project until the first project is over. Because the competition is very demanding and lasts a long time, the warriors will not take the annual exams. Old Barty said so, and after announcing this, he turned his gaze to Dumbledore. Dumbledore took a step forward, winked at Lin, and said, "According to Mr. Crouch, the warriors who participate in the Triwizard Tournament do not need to take the annual exams, but you can't, Lin. You are a 5th year student this year and need to take the OWL exam organized by the Ministry of Magic, so you may have to work harder." Lin smiled and shook his head. With his magic level, it would be no problem for him to pass the practical exam of the OWL exam perfectly, and he also remembered most of the theoretical knowledge. After all, in addition to the required courses, he only took an ancient rune course, and his understanding of ancient runes was probably not comparable to that of the professor of the ancient rune course. After old Barty finished the so-called guidance, the warriors were allowed to go back and rest. After leaving the room, Lin looked at Harry, who was walking behind him. He patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "Take care of yourself, Harry." Hearing this, Harry raised his head and looked at the dark red eyes. He seemed to be a little depressed. "Senior O, do you think someone really wants me to die?" Lin said lightly, "Maybe, or maybe not. Harry, no matter whether there is anyone who wants to harm you in the Triwizard Tournament, you must remain vigilant." After that, Lin went to the direction of the Slytherin common room. Looking at Lin's departing back, Harry nodded gently and whispered in a voice that only he could hear, "Thank you, Senior Rao." Harry didn't know how he got back to the Gryffindor common room. He came to the fat lady in a trance and read out the password dryly. Nonsense. The fat lady's portrait swung forward and let Harry walk into the Gryffindor common room. When the door to the Gryffindor common room was opened, more than a dozen hands pulled Harry into the common room at the same time. All the little lions in the common room were cheering. Some were whistling, some were shouting, and some were screaming and trying to throw Harry up. These little Gryffindor lions were celebrating that Harry could become a warrior. When Lin became the champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, they still felt sorry that the champion was from Slytherin instead of Gryffindor. But now, Harry, as a little Gryffindor lion, has also become a champion of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which means that Gryffindor is not worse than Slytherin. How can they not be happy? Exclamation mark. Looking at the little lions who surrounded him and kept stuffing food and butterbeer into his arms, Harry struggled and told them that he wanted to sleep, but no one cared about his thoughts. They surrounded Harry. Harry scanned the common room, hoping to find Hermione, Irina and Ron, hoping to find a little reason. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he saw Irina coming out of the door of the girls' dormitory. He immediately cast his hopeful eyes on Irina, hoping that Irina could save him from the sea of suffering. At this time, seeing Harry surrounded by the crowd, Irina subconsciously frowned. As one of the planners of this plan, she knew too well what was going on with Harry's name being put into the Goblet of Fire. Harry, as her friend, was at the center of the vortex, but she couldn't tell him, which made Irina feel very difficult. And now, Harry was surrounded by people unwillingly, and as his friend, Irina naturally had to help Harry out. "Everyone, please listen to me," Irina stepped forward and said loudly. However, none of the little lions who were immersed in joy paid any attention to Irina, and they were still cheering and shouting. Seeing this, Irina put her wand against her throat and chanted a spell. Loud voice. With the help of the loud voice spell, her voice became much louder. She said again, "Everyone stop for a moment, I have something to say." Irina's voice was deafening, and even a picture frame several meters away shook. However, under such a loud voice, except for Fred and George and a few others, the others were still immersed in the things in front of them and ignored Irina's words. "Shut up." Irina was immediately angry, and the ice power in her body was running rapidly. She swung her right hand, and an ice blue light flew out and landed at everyone's feet. Then, endless ice surged wildly, and in the icy mist, an ice wall rose from the ground and connected to the ceiling of the Gryffindor common room, separating Harry from the other little lions around him. The low temperature brought by the ice wall made the other little lions tremble constantly, and some of them sneezed with their necks shrunk. Seeing Irina was angry, the little lions finally calmed down. They all huddled together and looked at Irina at a loss. Big sister, what's the matter?" A 4th grade little lion who was shivering from the cold asked. Irina then removed the ice wall. She said helplessly, "Look at you guys. If you could have behaved earlier, why would I have done this? Although Harry has become a warrior of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, don't be too happy. Harry, tell them, did you put your name into the goblet of fire? As Irina's voice fell, everyone turned their eyes to Harry. Chapter 309, stuff it into your head full of sedge. Seeing Irina coming to his rescue, Harry immediately looked at her with gratitude, and then said honestly, no. Irina nodded, looked at everyone else, and said loudly, do you think Harry can break the ban set by Professor Dumbledore? Don't forget, even Fred and George's aging potion is ineffective against Professor Dumbledore's ban. Hearing Irina's words, the little lions in the Gryffindor common room were all talking, but many of them were still frowning, looking skeptical. A 6th grade lion asked, Lowell, if Potter didn't throw his name into the goblet of fire, who else would have thrown his name into the goblet of fire, and what would be the purpose of that person? Irina said lightly, Senior, you should remember what Professor Dumbledore said before, why the Triwizard Tournament was stopped, right? Hearing this, the 6th grade lion nodded and answered subconsciously, it was because there were too many deaths in the Triwizard Tournament that year. Before the 6th grade lion finished speaking, many of the little lions who had doubts, including him, showed a look of sudden realization. And the 6th grade lion even exclaimed, Lowell, are you saying that someone wants to kill Harry and let him die in this extremely dangerous Triwizard Tournament? The words of the 6th grade lion caused panic among the little lions in the Gryffindor common room. They made sounds of surprise, and the sound of gasping for air rose, and fell in the Gryffindor common room. Harry was a little depressed. Professor Moody and Lin both thought that someone wanted to kill him. Now even Irina said so. Could it be that someone really wanted him to die? Just when Harry was extremely confused, Fred asked the question in his mind, Irina, who do you think wants to kill Harry? Hearing this, Irina chuckled. She looked around at the people around her and said word by word, who else wants to kill the savior and make the magical world chaotic again? If I'm not mistaken, that person is probably Voldemort. As the name Voldemort sounded, most of the little lions shuddered subconsciously, as if the ice wall released by Irina had not disappeared before. Nonsense, the mysterious man is obviously dead. A 7th grade little lion said sharply. Irina nodded gently and said, I don't deny this, but you must all know that Voldemort is not completely dead yet. The remnant of Voldemort that Lin and I forced back 3 years ago is the best proof. I think it will not be difficult for him to contact those Death Eaters who are still active. Hearing Irina's words, those who still had doubts about Irina fell silent. Okay, everyone doesn't need to be so heavy-hearted. Since we all know the other party's plot, let's not let them succeed. Irina clapped her hands gently to attract everyone's attention. We shouldn't cheer blindly here, but should protect Harry's safety, and not give the Death Eaters a chance to succeed. Everyone nodded heavily. Seeing the little lion's common hatred of the enemy, Harry was also moved and wiped his eyes. We must protect Potter, and not let the you-know-who take advantage of the opportunity. A 5th-year little lion stood up and said. Another 3rd-year lion nodded and said, yes, we must stay by Potter's side anytime and anywhere, and not give anyone with ulterior motives a chance. Another 7th-year lion suggested, I suggest that our 5th-year and above students follow Harry's side every day during their spare time. Everyone should come in groups of 5 according to their schedules, and take turns every big class. These Gryffindor lions discussed how to protect Harry and stop the mysterious man's plan. They even talked about how to protect Harry in the toilet. Hearing these words, Harry's face turned pale. If they really followed him when he went to the toilet, he would probably not even have the most basic privacy. In the end, Irina interrupted their discussion helplessly. Everyone, there is no need to follow Harry, even when he goes to the toilet. I think everyone just needs to protect Harry when he leaves the common room. After all, there can't be anyone with ulterior motives among us, right? These lions nodded slightly. They didn't think there would be undercover Death Eaters among them. Seeing that they were relieved, Harry breathed a sigh of relief. After the Gryffindor lions had discussed a plan to protect Harry, Harry walked towards his dormitory exhausted. However, things did not go as smoothly as Harry imagined. After returning to the dormitory, Harry was scolded by Ron, who stayed in the dormitory the whole time and knew nothing about what happened in the common room. Ron, Voldemort wants to murder me, and you are here jealous of a little thing. Harry roared at Ron angrily. Hearing the name Voldemort, Ron trembled, and then he said angrily, "Don't mention that name. You said I was jealous of you, but when you threw your name into the goblet of fire, when did you think of me? Are we still best buddies?" Ron, whose brain was filled with anger, subconsciously ignored Voldemort's words about murdering Harry, and was furious at the word jealousy that Harry said. Harry sneered and said, "Even the entire Gryffindor class knows about this. Are you the only one who is kept in the dark? If I could, I would really like to stuff this damn warrior identity into your brain full of spurge." Ron looked at Harry in disbelief, and he loudly questioned, "Are you possessed by Snape? Do you think I care about your crappy warrior? Harry, you selfish bastard." Harry felt his blood rushing up, and the fatigue that had originally arisen from dealing with those Ministry of Magic officials and Gryffindor classmates seemed to disappear. He roared, "Ron, you idiot. Voldemort wants to murder me. Voldemort wants to murder me. Can't you hear it? Or is it that the only thing left in your ears is this damn warrior?" Harry's hands grasped Ron's shoulders tightly like a pair of pliers, and his forehead rested against Ron's forehead. His emerald eyes were now full of bloodshot, and his saliva was splashing. Chapter 310. Poor Harry. Looking at Harry, who was like a beast in front of him, Ron seemed to be frightened. He stayed in place, and did not move until Harry gasped and loosened his hand holding his shoulder. He barely came back to his senses. "Harry, what did you say? The mysterious man wants to murder you? What is going on?" Ron noticed the key point in Harry's words, and woke up from his jealousy. Harry reluctantly told Ron what happened in the common room. Hearing this, Ron realized that he had wronged Harry. He could not help but feel very ashamed. "I'm sorry, Harry, Harry waved his hand to show that he forgave the other party. After all, he did not control his emotions just now. After the 4 warriors were selected, Hogwarts Castle returned to its original tranquility. However, because Harry took away the position of the warrior of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the little snakes of Slytherin became more and more resentful of Harry. As Lin's roommate, Malfoy was indignant and found many senior Slytherin students to make a large number of badges. The badge had 2 different sides. One side reads "Support Lin En, the real warrior of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." After the wearer pressed the badge would change to another side, and the other side read "Potter Stinky Shit." This made the relationship between Slytherin and Gryffindor more tense. In the corridors of the castle, lion cubs and snakes could often be seen swearing at each other, and even pulling out their wands to duel. However, these situations did not affect Harry too much. After the Gryffindor lions learned that the truth about Harry's selection as a warrior was Voldemort's conspiracy, many senior lions surrounded Harry during the class every day to protect Harry's safety. Those Slytherin snakes who were used to being alone naturally did not dare to approach or provoke this group of lions. After all, no matter how confident they are in their magic skills, they dare not fight a group alone. Under such a tense relationship between the 2 colleges, even Irina did not dare to go to Lin En openly. After all, not all the little lions knew that she and Lin En were good friends, and she did not want to be exposed to the eyes of those little lions in the same college, who mistook her for a traitor. Therefore, these days, Irina went to the Black Lake to find Lin En at night. Although the 2 of them already knew what the first project of the Triwizard Tournament was, seeing is believing, and they still had to see it in person before they could feel at ease. Time soon came to the day when the warriors participating in the Triwizard Tournament tested their wands. After receiving the notice, Lin En brought his wand to the testing site. This is a smaller classroom. Most of the desks in the classroom were pushed to the back of the classroom, leaving a large open space in the middle. There were 3 desks in this open space, placed side by side in front of the blackboard. The desks were covered with a long piece of velvet. Behind the velvet-covered desks were 5 chairs. Ludo Bagman sat on one of the chairs. He was talking to a witch in a magenta robe. The witch's hair was made into delicate, stiff and weird curls, which matched her big chin, and looked particularly awkward. She wore a pair of jeweled glasses, and her thick and fat fingers were holding a crocodile leather handbag. Her nails were 2 inches long and painted red. After seeing the witch's exaggerated dress, Lin was sure of her identity. Ritter Skeeter. He was no stranger to Ritter Skeeter. Last year, in order to exonerate Sirius, he used the relationship of the Royal family in the Daily Prophet to create public opinion in the British wizarding world that the trial procedures of the Ministry of Magic were not rigorous and the truth of the year might be hidden. There was a report written by Rita Skeeter. The wand testing ceremony can only begin after all the warriors have arrived. In this classroom, the warriors besides him are only Fleur and Crumb. Harry seems not to have arrived yet. So, Lin chatted with Fleur who kept talking to him, waiting for Harry to arrive. Ah, he's here. The fourth warrior. Come in, Harry, come in. There's nothing to worry about. It's just the wand testing ceremony. The other judges will be here soon. After a while, Ludo's surprised voice sounded, and he said happily towards the door. Testing wands? Harry walked in from the door, and he glanced around the small classroom, and said a little uneasily, "We have to check that your wands are fully functional and in good condition, because your wands are your most important weapons in the future competitions." Ludo explained to Harry, and then turned his eyes to Rita. "The expert in charge of checking wands is upstairs with Dumbledore. Then you need to take a few photos. This is Rita Skeeter. She is writing a short article about the Triwizard Tournament for the Daily Prophet." As early as when Harry walked into the room, Rita had stopped writing the manuscript in her hand, and her eyes stayed on the lightning scar on Harry's forehead. "Maybe it won't be that small, Ludo," Rita said, her eyes fixed on Harry, as if she was looking at some heavy news. "Before we start, can I talk to Harry for a few words? The youngest warrior, you know, to add a little color to the article," Ludo said loudly. "No problem. I wonder if Harry objects." Harry's face was full of reluctance, but because of face, he did not directly say that he objected. However, seeing that Harry didn't say anything, Rita took it as Harry's acquiescence. Her bright red claw-like fingers grabbed Harry's arm, dragged him out of the room, and opened a door next to it. Rita smiled and said, "That's great. Come on, dear." Then, Rita took Harry to the small broom closet. Watching Harry being taken away by Rita, Lin's eyes were full of sympathy. He could imagine how Rita would fabricate Harry's past and publish it in the Daily Prophet. Poor Harry. Lin's mouth curled up, and he didn't know if he was gloating. After a while, Dumbledore and another person Lin was more familiar with came down from the stairs. The person Lin was more familiar with was Mr. Ollivander, who sold Lin the mahogany grafted sycamore wand. Dumbledore's eyes swept over Lin, Fleur, and Crumb in turn. After finding that Harry was not here, Dumbledore asked Lin, "Where is Harry?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311, The Nurturing of the Mahogany Grafted Phoenix Wood Wand. Lin pointed to the small broom closet next door. After learning where Harry was, Dumbledore walked over and opened the door of the broom closet. "Dumbledore, how are you?" Looking at Dumbledore who had arrived, Rita deliberately put on a happy look, and where Dumbledore couldn't see, her quill and parchment suddenly disappeared from the box of magical stain remover, and Rita's claw-like fingers were hurriedly fastening the buckle of her crocodile leather handbag. While pretending to be happy, Rita stretched out her hand to Dumbledore. "I wonder if you have read my article about the International Confederation of Wizards conference in the summer? It's great." Dumbledore chuckled and said lightly, "I especially like to read the part where you describe me as a rigid old lunatic." Rita Skeeter didn't seem to be ashamed at all when the person involved pointed out her immoral deeds in person. Rita argued, "I just want to point out that some of your views are a bit outdated, Dumbledore. Many wizards out there." Dumbledore interrupted her, smiled, bowed politely, and said, "I'm very willing to hear your frank reasoning, Rita, but I'm afraid we can only talk about this issue later. The wand detection ceremony is about to begin. If one of our warriors hides in the broom room, the ceremony cannot be carried out." With Dumbledore's help, Harry ran out of the broom room as if escaping, and came to a chair next to Lin and sat down. At the velvet table in front of them, 4 of the 5 referees were already sitting: Karkaroff, Madame Maxim, Ludo Bagman and Old Barty. After Dumbledore sat down at the referee's table, he said to Lin and the other 2, "Please allow me to introduce Mr. Ollivander. He will check your wands to make sure they are in good condition before the game." In fact, among the 4 warriors present, except for Fleur and Crumb, all the warriors knew Mr. Ollivander. After all, no young wizard in the British wizarding world did not buy their wands from Mr. Ollivander. Miss Delica, you go first, okay? Mr. Ollivander said, walking to the open space in the middle of the room. Fleur nodded slightly, and she walked towards Mr. Ollivander as lightly as a lark, and handed him her wand. Mr. Ollivander took Fleur's wand, and he seemed to be wielding a baton, letting the wand spin between his slender fingers, and the wand sprayed many pink and golden sparks. Then, he put the wand close to his eyes, and looked at it carefully. Mr. Ollivander frowned and said, not bad, 9.5 inches, very flexible, made of maple wood, contains, oh my god. Contains Avila hair, Fleur said generously, my grandmother's hair. Mr. Ollivander nodded and said, yes, of course, I have never used Vila hair myself. I think wands made of Vila hair are too sensitive and willful. But everyone has their own preferences. Since it suits you. As he spoke, Mr. Ollivander ran his fingers over the wand, obviously checking for scratches and bruises. At the end of the inspection ceremony, Mr. Ollivander whispered, orchids are in bloom. As Mr. Ollivander's voice fell, a bunch of flowers bloomed on the head of the wand. After seeing the perfect flower, Mr. Ollivander's face bloomed with a smile. He collected the flowers and returned the wand to Fleur. Very good, in good condition. Next. Mr. Owl, it's your turn. Mr. Ollivander cast his eyes on Lin. Lin walked up and handed the wand to Mr. Ollivander. Ah, this is my product, isn't it? The moment he took the wand, Mr. Ollivander's face showed surprise. Yes, I remember it very clearly. Mahogany grafted with sycamore, 13.25 inches, dragon's heartstring. The material is a bit fragile. Gently stroking the wand with red lines, Mr. Ollivander's brows suddenly frowned, and he asked, this is a wand that is very suitable for using fire magic, but the red lines of the sycamore wood on the wand body seem a bit dim. I don't think you often use it to cast fire spells, right? Lin nodded slightly. As early as his first grade, he had already learned how to cast fire spells without a wand, so most of the time, when he cast fire spells, he used no wand to cast them, and rarely used a wand. Even for the Fiendfire and the Gulliver, Lin En only used the wand to release them the first few times. After gradually becoming familiar with controlling these 2 types of fire, he mostly used his left hand to cast spells silently, and without a wand. After all, with Lin En's affinity for fire, his control over fire has reached an extremely terrifying level. Even if he casts spells silently and without a wand, the power of the fire released is not inferior to that of the wand grafted with mahogany and sycamore. In this case, for the sake of convenience, he naturally didn't need to use the wand to cast spells. Waste of God. It's really a waste of God. Unexpectedly, Mr. Ollivander frowned, and his face didn't look good at all. Hearing this, Lin En also frowned unconsciously. From Mr. Ollivander's words, he could sense that there seemed to be some hidden secrets in this wand that he had used for 5 years that even he himself had not noticed. Lin asked, any questions, Mr. Ollivander? Mr. Ollivander looked at Lin, and he said in a deep voice, this mahogany grafted sycamore wand has a very high affinity for flames. Even if you place it in the flames, it will not ignite. Instead, it can nourish its own power in the flames. If you often use fire spells, the hot magic power will be emitted through the wand, and the remaining flames will be absorbed by it to nourish the wand itself. In this case, the lines on the wand should be bright red. But now, the light on these lines is very dim, which shows that it has not absorbed much flame as nutrients. A wand that is so suitable for fire spells has not been cherished by you. No wonder I say you are wasting resources. If this mahogany grafted sycamore wand can be well nourished, then the power of the spells you release through this wand may be greatly improved. Mr. Ollivander sighed. Chapter 312. The growth potential of the magic wand and the improvement of the power of spells. Hearing Mr. Ollivander's words, Lin En's heart moved and asked, Mr. Ollivander, you said that placing this magic wand in the flame will not only not damage the magic wand, but also nourish its power, right? Mr. Ollivander nodded and said, in theory, this is true, but only magic flames can nourish the magic wand, and ordinary flames have almost no effect. However, magic flames require a constant supply of magic power, which is a great test for the magic power of wizards, and it is not worth the loss. Therefore, instead of placing the magic wand in the magic flame, consuming a lot of your magic power, but still having no effect, it is better for you to use this magic wand more, to release the fire spell and let the flames remaining on the magic wand be absorbed by it. Mr. Ollivander said so. Lin En nodded slightly. Although it was not worth the loss to place the magic wand in the magic flame, the flame he controlled was not just the magic flame summoned by the blazing flame. If this wand made of mahogany grafted with sycamore wood is placed in the gubbly fairy fire he summoned, then this eternal flame will not only not need to continuously absorb his magic power, but can also provide nutrients for the wand all the time. To be honest, after learning that his wand can absorb the flames and transform them into its own nutrients to increase the power of spells, Lin En was very moved. After all, Mr. Ollivander did not say how much the upper limit of this wand could reach under the nourishment of the flames. If its increase in spells can reach the level of the Elder Wand one day, then this wand can also be called a holy weapon. Thinking of this, Lin En wanted to give up and run away now and return to the dormitory to put his wand into the gubbly fairy fire to nourish it. After learning to cast spells without a wand, the wand in Lin En's eyes was just a tool to assist in casting spells. It was no longer as necessary as it was at the beginning, but became more and more dispensable as Lin En's magical attainments improved. However, after learning that this wand still had room for improvement and could even greatly increase the power of spells, Lin En paid the most attention to the wand. After Mr. Ollivander returned the wand to Lin En returned to his seat and sat down, thinking about something. If his mahogany grafted sycamore wand had the ability to absorb the power of fire and continue to sublimate, then did Irina's ice crystal wood wand have the same or similar functions? You know, Irina was just like him. After she learned the wandless casting of the freezing spell, she became less and less dependent on the wand and ice magic. If Irina's ice crystal wood wand also had similar functions, then they really lost a lot in the past few years. The more Lin En thought about it, the more he felt that he had lost 100 million. While Lin En's thoughts were drifting, Mr. Ollivander was also continuing his wand inspection work. At this time, Mr. Ollivander was holding Crumb's wand and looking at it carefully. Well, whispered Mr. Ollivander, if I'm not mistaken, it's the work of Grigorovich, an excellent wand maker, though I don't quite agree with his style, but... He held up the wand and turned it over and over before his eyes, examining it carefully. Mr. Ollivander glanced at Crumb and said, yes, hornbeam, with the heart cords of a dragon, right? Much thicker than one usually sees, very hard, 10¼ inches, flocks of birds. As Mr. Ollivander chanted the spell, the hornbeam wand made a loud bang sound, like a pistol firing, and a flock of small birds fluttered out of the wand head and flew out of the open window into the pale sunlight. Very good, said Mr. Ollivander, handing the wand back to Crumb. And the last one, Mr. Potter. Harry stood up, brushed past Crumb, and came to Mr. Ollivander and handed over his wand. Taking the wand from Harry, Mr. Ollivander's light-colored eyes suddenly sparkled with excitement, and he said happily, ah, yes, I remember it very clearly. Mr. Ollivander spent much more time checking Harry's wand than Fleur and Crumb's wands, second only to Lin, whose wand had special functions. At the end of the wand inspection, he made a stream of wine spray out of Harry's wand head, and then he handed the wand back to Harry, announcing that it was in very good condition. After the wand inspection ceremony, Dumbledore stood up and said to everyone with a smile, thank you, everyone, you can go back to class now. Maybe it's more convenient to go downstairs to eat. Anyway, they will be out of class soon. Ludo came up with a magic camera, took a group photo for everyone, and then let everyone leave on their own. For more than 2 weeks after the wand inspection ceremony, Lin kept his wand in the dormitory and placed it in a bowl of gubbler fairy fire. He had hardly carried his wand with him for more than 2 weeks. He could cast most of the commonly used magic in daily life without a wand, which made his daily life almost unaffected even without a wand. Not only that, Lin En also found Irina and asked her to test whether her wand would change in the ice. The result was very gratifying. When Irina froze the ice crystal wood wand in a piece of ice, she was surprised to find that some ice blow lines on the ice crystal wood wand were emitting light under the penetration of the cold air. After freezing the ice crystal wood wand in the ice for a day and a night, Irina was even more surprised to find that when she released other spells through the ice crystal wood wand, the power of those spells seemed to be a few points higher than before. This means that her ice crystal wood wand, like Lin En's mahogany grafted sycamore wood wand, also has a certain growth potential. After learning that Irina's spell power was enhanced with the help of the ice crystal wood wand, Lin couldn't wait to take out his wand from the Gobbler Fairy Fire and tried to cast a spell. Under the test of the alchemical creation that Lin had prepared in advance, Lin found that the power of his spell seemed to have increased by about 2% compared to before, which made Lin more convinced of what Mr. Ollivander said. The growth potential of Lin and Irina's wands means that they may have a holy weapon that is not inferior to the old wand in the future. How can they not be ecstatic? Exclamation mark. Chapter 313. It's great to meet you. On the Saturday before the first event of the True Wizard tournament, Lin and Irina went to Hogsmeade Village together. Lin needed to buy some alchemical materials, while Irina needed to replenish some daily necessities and food for the magical animals in the suitcase. Lin has recently been studying the improvement plan of the time loop array. In his opinion, the time loop array can play a much better role in actual combat than the time stop array and the illusion array. He plans to try to improve the time loop array through some alchemical materials to improve its concealment during the formation and operation. It is very common in the field of alchemy to add some physical alchemical materials to the pure energy alchemical array to increase the strength of the alchemical array. Just like the time loop array and the time stop array themselves, if they leave the physical alchemical material of the sand of time, they will hardly play their original role. When Lin and Irina arrived at Hogsmeade Village together, Harry, Ron and Hermione also set out from Hogwarts Castle. After learning that Harry's selection as a warrior was Voldemort's conspiracy, Harry contacted Sirius at Hermione's suggestion and told him about it, wanting to ask Sirius what he should do. With the help of Lin and Irina, Sirius, who had been cleared of the crime, naturally did not need to hide his meeting with Harry as in the original book. They made an appointment to meet in Hogsmeade this weekend. Sirius wanted to meet Lin and Irina to discuss things about Harry, but they declined. In order to make the plan go smoothly, they did not intend to reveal too much information about Voldemort's resurrection to Sirius. Otherwise, if Sirius, this guy, ran to Little Hangleton Village to confront Voldemort in order to save Harry on impulse and was killed by Voldemort with an Avada Kedavra, then they would have made a fool of themselves. At this time, Lin and Irina had already bought what they needed and met outside Madame Puddifoot's tea shop. Have a drink. Lin put the materials in his hand into the backpack with the traceless extension spell and then invited Irina. Irina nodded and agreed happily. Okay. So, the two walked into Madame Puddifoot's tea house side by side. After seeing the other couples in the tea house, Lin's heart moved slightly and his right hand subconsciously held Irina's hand. Feeling the warmth from his hand, Irina's body trembled slightly, but she did not resist. Looking at the hands of Lin and Irina, Mrs. Puddifoot behind the counter smiled faintly. She said to the two of them with a smile, "Welcome to Mrs. Puddifoot's tea house. Today's couple set meal is 20% off. Would you like to have one?" Lin was stunned when he heard Mrs. Puddifoot's words. He subconsciously said, "We are not." However, before Lin finished speaking, Irina interrupted him and said firmly, "One." Mrs. Puddifoot's smile became even more. She nodded and said, "Okay, please wait a moment." Lin looked at Irina, whose face was slightly red, and was a little surprised. "What are you looking at? Let's go and find a better seat." Feeling Lin's gaze, Irina rolled her eyes at him. "Humph, this blockhead." Irina broke away from Lin's hand and quickly walked to a seat by the window and sat down. Lin smiled awkwardly and sat down opposite her. Not long after, 2 drinks were served to the table. In front of Irina was a glass of rose lemonade, which looked transparent and tender, mixed with rose petals and lemon slices. Irina gently picked up the drink in her hand. Before she took a sip, she could already smell the faint fragrance of flowers and the freshness of lemon. Feeling the sweet smell of this rose lemonade, her previous nameless anger at Lin En's ignorance quietly dissipated. "Cheers." Irina smiled lightly, picked up the rose lemonade, and gestured to Lin En, then took a sip. In an instant, the rich sweetness bloomed in her mouth, with a little bit of sourness besides the sweetness, just like the young love in the bright spring. Although this glass of rose lemonade is a fruit drink, Irina can feel a small amount of alcohol in it. The addition of a little alcohol in addition to the astringency can actually give people a refreshing and pleasant romance. It has to be said that the couple set menu at Madame Puddifoot's tea house is really thoughtful. The drinks here, whether in symbolic meaning or taste, are in line with the tastes of those young lovers. Looking at Irina's smiling eyes and her big eyelashes floating up and down, the corners of Lin En's mouth kept rising. Cheers. Lin En picked up the drink in his hand and said softly. The drink in Lin En's hand was a glass of cranberry mojito. Mojito is one of the most famous rums, originated in Cuba. Mojito is the taste of first love in summer, and is deeply loved by ordinary people and wizards. However, for the sake of the health of the little wizard, the cranberry mojito in this couple's set menu only adds a little alcohol, and the fragrance of cranberries occupies the majority of this drink. Under the warm light of Madame Puddifoot's tea house, the girl with long white hair lowered her head and drank the drink that represented young love. Opposite her, the boy held the drink that represented first love in midsummer, but he was not in a hurry to taste it. Instead, he stared at the girl opposite him with a faint smile on his face. "It's great to meet you," Lin En whispered to himself, and his dark red eyes were full of tenderness. Irina raised her head. She didn't hear Lin En's words clearly. There was a little confusion in her ice blue eyes. "What did you say?" She stared at him blankly. Her soft long hair fell on the table, and her delicate face looked a little cute at this time. Lin En smiled slightly, drank the cranberry mojito in his hand, and said with a smile, "Nothing." After that, Lin En put down the empty cup in his hand, and admired her face openly. Actually, it wasn't that he was stupid before, it was just that Irina rarely took the initiative, so he didn't react for a while, but thinking back, she expressed her feelings so passionately. Isn't this the best situation? Thinking of this, Lin En's smile became even bigger. "Oh, how come you drank it all in one breath? This kind of delicacy should be savored carefully. You are really wasting it." In the cozy tea house, the girl's complaints came, but it made the atmosphere in the tea house even brighter. Chapter 314 I trust Lin En, just like your father trusts me. On the other side of Hogsmeade, in the Three Broomsticks, Harry and his two companions were sitting at a table by the window. Sitting opposite them was Sirius Black. After successfully exonerating himself, Sirius organized the Black family's property that he inherited. He was able to walk on the streets openly, and no longer looked sloppy like in the original book, but took good care of his image. Today, Sirius seemed to have regained his unruly appearance in his youth, looking like a noble young master, and of course, this was indeed the case. He was wearing a suit that pure-blood nobles wore when attending formal meetings, which seemed out of place in this small bar, but Sirius didn't care about it. "Harry, you told me in your letter that Voldemort wanted to murder you. What's going on?" Sirius asked Harry with a serious look in his eyes, tapping the table with his index finger. Harry told Sirius the whole story. After learning the whole story, Sirius held his chin with his hand, as if thinking about something. From Harry's words, he learned that most of these things were revealed to them by Lin and Irina. However, Lin and Irina declined his invitation. "Harry, you have to trust Lin and Irina, no matter what happens, okay?" Sirius stared at Harry's emerald eyes. He hesitated for a long time, and finally decided to bet on the two little wizards who helped him get rid of the crime. He believed in the children of his comrades, and the little witch who had a good relationship with Harry and the others. Since they were able to discover this information, and tell him without reservation, they must be able to protect Harry, just like they helped him get rid of the crime last year. Sirius didn't know that the information Lin and Irina told Harry was just the most obvious part of the tip of the iceberg. Even if they didn't say it, Professor Moody would say it out loud in order to mobilize the emotions of others. Of course, if this information had not been told by Lin and Irina, Harry and his friends would not have taken this matter too seriously, considering their trust in Professor Moody. After all, Mad-Eye Moody could even use a spell to blow up the trash can in his backyard, so it was not surprising that he believed that Voldemort wanted to murder Harry. In this case, his credibility was not very high. This is why Professor Moody spoke out about this matter without hesitation, because he was sure that no one would believe him. Harry scratched his head and said, "Of course I believe in big sister Irina, it's just, Senior Owl did take care of me a lot and helped us a lot, but if we trust him without reservation." Seeing this, Sirius sighed and said seriously, "I know you are worried about Lin being a Slytherin. To be honest, when I was a student, I also thought that no one in Slytherin was a good person, until I met him, Lin's father, Henry Owl." Hearing Sirius' words, Harry subconsciously leaned over, wanting to hear more from Sirius. However, Sirius did not continue the topic. He just said, "Harry, you have to know that I trust Lin, just like your father trusts me. He will not harm you, and there is no reason to harm you, understand?" Since Sirius said so, Harry naturally had no reason to object. He nodded gently and said, "I know, I will protect myself." Sirius nodded with satisfaction. He said loudly to Ms. Rosmerta behind the counter, "Ms. Rosmerta, please give me 4 cups of butterbeer, thank you." Ms. Rosmerta smiled at Sirius, the wizard she had watched grow up. She took 4 cups of butterbeer and placed them on the table in front of Harry and others. Ron took the cup and took a big sip. He burped with satisfaction and said, "It's so comfortable. It's a pity that Irina is not here, so I can't drink such delicious butterbeer." Hearing this, Hermione said teasingly, "Maybe she is enjoying something better." Harry and Sirius both laughed. The 4 drank butterbeer and talked about the Triwizard Tournament. Just as the cups in the hands of the 4 were empty and Sirius was about to get up to pay the bill, the door of the 3 broomsticks opened again, and Hagrid and Professor Moody walked in. Hagrid lowered his body and was talking to Professor Moody. Hagrid waved to Ms. Rosmerta to order, while Professor Moody was drinking the unknown liquid in the curved bottle he carried with him. Seeing this scene, people including Sirius thought that Professor Moody was just suspicious by nature and didn't dare to drink other people's things, but they never thought that the curved bottle contained not a drink at all, but Polyjuice potion. Ms. Rosmerta handed a glass of fire whiskey to Hagrid, and she glanced at Professor Moody with some dissatisfaction, probably thinking that Professor Moody's behavior was an insult to the hot drinks in her pub. At this time, Professor Moody intentionally or unintentionally cast his eyes on Harry, and after his magic eye was fixed on Harry, he patted Hagrid's waist and back, and whispered a few words. Then the two turned around, and came to Harry's table. "Congratulations on your acquittal, Sirius, my old friend." Professor Moody smiled and stretched out his hand to Sirius. Sirius stretched out his hand and shook hands with him. Although Professor Moody has become crazy now, and is called Mad Eye, he still has a good impression of this comrade. While Professor Moody was talking to Sirius, Hagrid leaned over beside Harry, pretending to look at the menu on Harry's desk, and said in a voice that only Harry could hear, "Harry, come to my cabin to find me at midnight today, and put on your invisibility cloak." After saying this, he stood up and deliberately said loudly, "Nice to meet you, Ron and Hermione." He blinked and left, and Professor Moody said goodbye to Sirius and followed Hagrid. "Harry, what did Hagrid say to you?" Hermione asked. She noticed Hagrid's movement just now. Harry did not hide it from the few people, but told them the truth. Hearing this, Sirius frowned. "Hagrid asked you to find him in the middle of the night. Well, I don't know if you have noticed that Moody seems to be a little bit wrong." Chapter 315 You want me to watch you two date? Exclamation mark. Looking at the bewildered looks on Harry and the other two's faces, Sirius remembered that Professor Moody had only moved into Hogwarts this year. Even if he behaved differently than before, Harry and the others would not have noticed. Sirius sighed and said, "Maybe I'm too suspicious. I always feel that Moody seems to be different from usual. But anyway, Harry, this is an extraordinary period. We can't ignore any suspicious factors. Stay alert, Harry." Harry, Ron and Hermione all nodded subconsciously. Sirius said, he thought for a while, and then said, "But Hagrid can be trusted. Since he has something to see you tonight, you can go with him." Although Hagrid's asking Harry to leave the castle during curfew violated school rules, Sirius was naturally not a pedantic person. Don't forget that the Marauders map was invented by Sirius and the others when they were young. Harry nodded again, and Ron and Hermione planned to help him act. As the sky gradually darkened, Lin and Irina returned to the castle early, while Harry and the others chatted with Sirius for a while. In the end, it was Sirius who urged them to go back. Time soon came to 11:30 in the middle of the night. Harry, who was lying on the bed pretending to sleep, turned over and got out of bed, put on the invisibility cloak, and Ron waved his wand to eliminate the sound made by Harry so that his movements would not be discovered by others. Harry quietly passed through the common room wearing the invisibility cloak. There were still a few people in the common room at this time. The Creevy brothers got a stack of badges showing support Lin En from somewhere and were trying to use magic to change the words on them to support Harry Potter. However, they took a lot of effort and all they could do was to fix the badge on Potter stinky shit. After about a minute, after Hermione helped open the door of the Gryffindor common room from the outside, Harry slipped out of the Gryffindor common room and left Hogwarts Castle. The field was dark now. Harry walked along the lawn towards Hagrid's hut. When he arrived at Hagrid's hut, he knocked on the door. "You're here, Harry?" Hagrid opened the door and whispered, looking around. Harry went into the hut. He looked at Hagrid and asked, "Yes, Hagrid, what do you want to see me for?" Hagrid said excitedly, "I'll show you something good." Hagrid had a flower stuck in his buttonhole, like a particularly large artichoke. It seemed that he no longer put engine oil on his head, but he must have spent a lot of time combing his hair. Harry could see the broken teeth of the comb in his hair. After seeing Hagrid's outfit, Harry couldn't help but feel a little suspicious. You know, Hagrid didn't look like he was going to show him anything now, but he was going to have a date with someone. At this time, Hagrid called Harry, opened the door of the hut, and strode into the darkness. Seeing this, Harry had to follow in a hurry, but he was surprised to find that Hagrid was leading him towards the house-like carriage of Bogsburton's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. "Hagrid, what are you doing?" Harry looked at Hagrid puzzled, not knowing his intention, but Hagrid only asked him to cover himself with the invisibility cloak. After Harry wrapped himself tightly with the invisibility cloak, Hagrid knocked 3 times on the door of the carriage with two crossed golden wands printed on it. Madame Maxim opened the door. She had a silk shawl wrapped around her extremely broad shoulders. She looked at Hagrid with a smile and asked, "Ah, Hagrid, is it time?" Hagrid greeted her with a smile and helped her out of the carriage. Hagrid led Madame Maxim around the edge of the Forbidden Forest. The two were very close. Harry followed them silently. For some reason, he felt as if he had been fooled by Hagrid. "You said you'd show me something good, so you mean you'd show me your date?" Exclamation mark. Madame Maxim seemed to have the same concerns as Harry. After a moment, she asked in a joking tone, "Where are you taking me, Hagrid?" Hagrid said in a hoarse voice, "You'll like it, Madame Maxim. It's worth seeing. Believe me. But, don't tell anyone that I brought you to see it, okay? You shouldn't know." "Of course not." Madame Maxim said so. Following Hagrid and Madame Maxim, Harry felt more and more anxious. He even had the idea of leaving the two of them and running back to the dormitory. But attracted by what Hagrid promised him that he hadn't seen yet, Harry gritted his teeth and trotted along to keep up with the pace of the two tall guys. Suddenly, Harry seemed to hear some noise, as if several men were shouting loudly in front of him, followed by a deafening and sharp roar. Hagrid led Madame Maxim around a bush and stopped, and Harry hurried over to join them, his mouth gaping in surprise. For a brief moment, Harry thought he saw bonfires and men jumping around them, but in fact, there were 4 dragons. 4 fierce-looking adult dragons, caged in a wooden enclosure, standing on their hind legs, roaring and snorting, with flames shooting out of their open, fanged mouths into the black night sky, their necks raised high, their mouths 50 feet off the ground. Among the 4 adult dragons, there was a silver blue dragon with a pair of long sharp horns, roaring and raging at the wizards on the field. There was a green dragon with smooth scales, twisting and stamping its feet desperately. There was also a red dragon with a circle of strange thin sharp horns around its face, spraying mushroom-shaped clouds of fire into the air. And finally a black dragon, more ferocious and terrifying than the other dragons, and this black dragon was closest to them. There were at least 30 wizards on the field, and every 7 or 8 wizards were responsible for dealing with a dragon. They pulled the chains, connecting the thick leather belts that tied the dragon's legs and necks, and tried desperately to subdue the 4 dragons. Seeing this spectacular scene, Harry was completely stunned. Harry raised his head, and from a high place above, he saw the eyes of the black dragon. The pupils were vertical like cat's eyes. It was not known whether it was out of fear or anger, but the eyes bulged, and it let out a shrill and piercing wail. "Stay there, Hagrid." At this time, a wizard near the fence shouted loudly, holding the chain in his hand tightly, "They can spit fire 20 feet away, you know. I saw this Hungarian horntail spray 40 feet." However, facing this terrifying black dragon, Hagrid looked like a mother with overflowing maternal love. He said softly, "It's so beautiful." In fact, except for Irina, who was not here, no one would think that Hagrid's aesthetic taste was normal. Chapter 316, Emerging and Gaining the Right to Speak. But where is Irina now? On the other side of the field, Lin En and Irina arrived here more than half an hour ago, after putting on the disillusionment charm. They watched the whole process of the dragon trainers bringing the 4 dragons here. Without Hagrid to lead the way, they had to rely on their vague impressions of the original book, and wandered around in the Forbidden Forest for a long time, before they found this field. Lin En stared at the 4 dragons. He knew that one of the 4 dragons would be his opponent in the first event of the True Wizard Tournament. Only by knowing yourself and the enemy can you win every battle. Lin En planned to judge the fighting power of these dragons by witnessing the process of these dragon trainers subduing the dragons, so as to evaluate the possibility of defeating the opponent and the strength he needed to expose. At this time, Lin En's eyes stayed on the most ferocious black dragon. This Hungarian horntail was the most powerful of the 4 dragons, so Lin En planned to use it as a reference. The dragon trainers were trying various methods to subdue the black dragon. "It's useless." A dragon trainer shouted loudly, "Recite the stunning spell. Count to 3, recite together." As the dragon trainer finished speaking, all the dragon trainers responsible for subduing the Hungarian horntail drew their wands. Soon, the dragon trainers shouted in unison, "Fall to the ground." Light beams shot into the dark night sky like flaming arrows, and the sparks fell on the thick scaly skin of the Hungarian horntail like a storm. The Hungarian horntail began to stagger under the attack of the dozen stunning spells. Its mouth opened wide and let out a silent roar. The fire in its nostrils gradually went out, but it still emitted green smoke. Then, it slowly fell down. The several-ton, black-scaled Hungarian horntail fell to the ground with a loud bang. The loud explosion shook the surrounding trees. Seeing this scene, Lin's expression gradually relaxed. It seems that the magic resistance of this Hungarian horntail is not as high as we thought. The magic level of these dragon trainers is between that of ordinary auras and elite auras. In other words, about 10 stunning spells cast by elite auras can knock this Hungarian horntail unconscious. Lin said so. When the power of the demon god is running at full power and drawing the magic power from the Philosopher's Stone to provide him with energy, the stunning spell he casts with his wand can withstand the power of 5 elite auras casting stunning spells at the same time. Even when casting without a wand, his stunning spell can withstand the power of 3 elite auras casting stunning spells at the same time. After all, the beam of light as thick as an adult's arm is terrifying enough just by looking at it. Irina nodded slightly and said, "In terms of magic alone, this Hungarian horntail is far inferior to you, Lin En. Even the flames it sprays may not be as strong as yours. In other words, as long as you don't let it get close to you, you can completely defeat it in a long-range battle." Lin En chuckled and said, "If it was just to defeat the dragon, we don't have to come here tonight. I not only want to win, but also win enough to attract people's attention. They will face Voldemort at the end of this school year, and before that, they must show enough strength to compete with Voldemort. Only with enough strength can they have enough say. Just like Harry in the original book, his own strength is not strong. Even if he escapes unscathed after facing Voldemort, no one will believe that he really saw Voldemort. People even think that Harry has delusions under the misleading of the Ministry of Magic. After all, Harry could be said to have cheated his way through the first round of the Triwizard Tournament. The rule of the Triwizard Tournament was that the only weapon a wizard could use was a wand, but Harry summoned his own firebolt through the spell of the spell, and won with his flying skills. Assuming that Harry showed enough strength to fight against the dragon head-on in the Triwizard Tournament, and even knocked it down alone, then no matter what Harry said in the future, people would have to weigh his words. In people's eyes, a truly powerful person has no need to lie. Therefore, defeating a ferocious Hungarian Hauntel in the Triwizard Tournament was the key to Lin's emergence in the British wizarding world and gaining the right to speak. After the 4 dragons were subdued by the dragon trainers one by one and fainted on the ground, Lin and Irina left without a word. On Monday morning, Lin was stopped by Harry on his way to the Transfiguration classroom. Looking at Harry, who was a little nervous, Lin asked in confusion, "Harry, what do you want to talk to me about?" Harry looked around and made sure that no one noticed this place. Then he whispered to Lin, "Senior role, the first project is the fire dragon." Hearing this, Lin suddenly realized that it seemed that Harry was worried that he was the only warrior who didn't know about it after meeting Madame Maxim and Karkaroff, so he came to tell him about this. Looking at Lin's calm eyes, Harry asked curiously, "Senior role, the first project is the fire dragon. Don't you have anything to say?" Lin chuckled and said, "Thank you for telling me this, Harry, but I know." Harry was stunned and said, "You know?" Lin blinked at him and said, "I was there that night too." Just when Harry wanted to say something else, Professor Moody suddenly appeared from behind Harry. He seemed to have planned it for a long time. After Harry told Lin the content of the first project, he took Harry away. Lin watched Professor Moody and Harry leave without stopping them. He understood that Professor Moody was trying to guide Harry to figure out a way to pass the first task. If there was one person in the castle who wanted Harry to pass the first task, it was not Ron or Hermione, but Professor Moody. After all, if Harry couldn't even pass the first task, how could he touch the goblet of fire and be teleported away in the last task? Exclamation mark. On the morning of the first task of the Triwizard Tournament, the entire Hogwarts castle was filled with tension and excitement. At noon, the professors announced that classes would be suspended. They wanted to give the young wizards enough time to go to the dragon enclosure outside the castle. Not long after Lin finished lunch, he received a notice to gather in a tent outside the dragon enclosure. He stood up, waved to Irina at the Gryffindor table, and walked out of the castle. Chapter 317 I Don't Need a Wand. When Lin En walked into the tent, he saw Fleur sitting on a stool in the corner, looking pale and sick, while Crumb's face became even gloomier. After seeing Lin En coming, Fleur's face finally regained some redness. She waved to Lin En and forced a smile. After learning that the first project involved a dragon, Fleur felt very panicked. After all, even 7 or 8 dragon trainers might not be able to subdue a dragon, let alone a young wizard like her who had not yet graduated. Exclamation mark. Not long after Lin En arrived here, Harry also arrived. Harry's face was almost the same as Fleur's, and they both looked like they might fall down at any time. However, Ludo Bagman, who was in charge of hosting the game, was not nervous at all. He looked at everyone with joy and introduced loudly, "Okay, now that everyone is here, it's time to introduce the situation to you. After the audience is here, I will pass this cloth bag to each of you in turn. You will pick out the small model of the thing you will face from it. They have different, types. I have one more thing to tell you. Oh, by the way, your task is to pick up the golden eggs. Under the protection of those things, you need to get the golden eggs in their hands. That's it," Ludo said, while holding up a purple silk bag and shaking it at the crowd. As time passed, Lin En and others could hear the sound of hundreds of feet walking through the tent. The owners of these feet were talking and laughing excitedly. People's joy is not shared, I just think they are noisy. As warriors of the Triwizard Tournament, the few people who were about to participate in this game felt that they were incompatible with those people, as if they belonged to another species. After the audience arrived, Ludo took off the purple silk bag and handed it to Fleur. He smiled and said, "Ladies first." Fleur trembled when she heard Ludo's words. She reached a shaking hand into the bag and took out a small lifelike dragon model. It was a Welsh green dragon with a number tied around its neck, number 2. After Fleur, it was Crumb who took out the bright red Chinese fireball dragon with number 3 tied around its neck. "It's your turn, Mr. All." Ludo put the purple silk bag in front of Lin and motioned for Lin to take out the fire dragon model. Lin reached into the bag and first touched a small creature, but he hesitated and put it aside. Instead, he took out another large creature covered with thorns. Hungarian Horntail, number 4. Ludo announced loudly when he saw the fire dragon model in Lin's hand. After learning about the type of dragon that Lin had drawn, Fleur couldn't help but look worried at Lin. The Hungarian horntail was the most ferocious type of dragon. If not handled properly, even an elite aura could be killed by it. However, Harry was relieved. After Lin, Fleur, and Crumb had all drawn dragon models, he knew what was left for him. Sure enough, after Harry took out the dragon model from his pocket, he saw the Swedish short-nosed dragon with number 1 tied around its neck. Although the Swedish short-nosed dragon was also very dangerous, it was docile compared to the Hungarian horntail. After everyone had drawn the dragon model, Ludo said to everyone, "Okay, you have all drawn the dragons you will face. The numbers on your necks are the order in which you will deal with the dragons. Do you understand? Okay, I will leave you for a while, because I have to explain to the audience. Harry, you are the first one. You will walk into the venue as soon as you hear the whistle. Do you understand?" Then, Ludo said, his eyes swept over Harry and others one by one, but when his eyes fell on Lin, he suddenly froze. You know, Harry, Fleur and Crumb were all holding their wands tightly at this time, fearing that they would face the dragon in the next second, but Lin looked relaxed with his hands in his pockets. Ludo looked up and down at Lin, but he could not see the wand of Lin in his pocket, or on his waist. So, Ludo couldn't help but ask in confusion, "Mr. O, where is your wand?" Lin shrugged and said calmly, "My wand is in the dormitory." Hearing Lin's words, Harry, Fleur and Crumb all showed horrified eyes, and Ludo was even more shocked. However, Ludo obviously thought that Lin forgot to bring his wand because he was nervous. He hurriedly said to Lin, "Mr. O, you are the 4th warrior to go on stage. While there is still time, you should go back and get it. Otherwise, it will be too late. As a wizard, how can you not bring your wand?" Hearing this, Lin smiled and said frankly, "I don't need a wand." Ludo didn't think that Lin could still escape from the dragon's mouth alive without his wand. He was so angry that he stomped his feet, but at this moment, a whistle sounded outside the tent. "Damn it, I have to run over." "Mr. Owl, no wizard doesn't need a wand. For the sake of your life and property, you should take care of yourself," Ludo said angrily, and he turned and ran out of the tent. As the first warrior to face the dragon, Harry also followed Ludo out of the tent. At this time, only Lin, Fleur and Crumb were left in the tent. Fleur looked at Lin anxiously, and she quickly said, "Lin, go back and get your wand. This is a dragon, and you are facing the most ferocious Hungarian horntail. This is not a joke." Seeing Fleur's worried look, Lin comforted her and said, "Don't worry, I'm sure I can pass that Hungarian horntail." Fleur thought Lin was just afraid of losing face, and she was so anxious that tears came out. "Lin, this is not the time to save face. I don't want you to die." Lin sighed helplessly. He knew Fleur must have misunderstood. Just when Lin En was about to show Fleur his skills and convince her that he had the ability to survive a dragon's mouth, a cheer suddenly sounded outside the tent, attracting everyone's attention. "One is down, and there are 3 left. Miss Delica, please come on stage." Ludo's voice came from outside the tent along with a whistle. Fleur stamped her feet anxiously. She almost forgot her fear and the fact that she was about to face a dragon. She glared at Lin En and then left. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318, Wandless Casting, Irresistible Flames. Seeing this scene, Lin En became more helpless. However, when he successfully defeated the Hungarian horntail and returned, Fleur would surely understand. Thinking of this, Lin En simply found a chair and sat down, waiting for his turn. Not long after, Fleur won the golden egg, and Crumb came on the stage after the whistle sounded. Only Lin En was left in the tent. Just when Lin En felt a little bored, a thunderous roar sounded, and Ludo's shouting came over, very bold. He showed extraordinary courage. "Ah, that's right, he got the golden egg." Hearing Ludo's commentary, Lin En was refreshed and stood up. He knew that it would be his turn soon. With the whistle blowing again, Lin En walked out of the tent, passed through a bush and a gap in the fence of the venue, and came to the competition venue. At this time, hundreds of little wizards were sitting on the stands above, and they all focused on watching Lin En walk into the competition venue. At the other end of the competition venue, a Hungarian horntail covered with black dragon scales stood tall. It crouched low, guarding the nest of eggs under it, and its wings were half folded. It was staring at Lin En with its vicious yellow eyes. The Hungarian horntail twisted its spiked tail violently, leaving several meters of pits and bumps on the hard ground. There was a roar of noise from the stands, and the voices cheering for Lin En were also one after another. Among these cheers and cheers, the loudest was Irina, who kept waving her hands in the Gryffindor camp. At this time, Irina's cheering was no different from those fans chasing stars in her previous life. Seeing this scene, Lin En couldn't help but touch his nose. He didn't expect Irina to be so crazy when watching his game. This gave him a heavy sense of mission. Irina was cheering for him. How could he let her down? Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Lin En took a step forward and looked at the Hungarian horntail in the distance with a fighting spirit. The Hungarian horntail was roaring at Lin En, hoping to drive away the intruder. The deafening roars of dragons came, which made the little wizards in the stands panic. Lin En took a look at the golden egg under the Hungarian horntail. When he waved his hands, thousands of golden lights broke through the air in an instant and fell into the nest under the Hungarian horntail. They intertwined into alchemical arrays and sealed the golden egg in the nest. These lines flashing with golden light are all defensive alchemical arrays. They can protect the golden egg from being accidentally injured in the battle between Lin En and the Hungarian horntail. Otherwise, if Lin En beat up the Hungarian horntail and was about to win, but the golden egg was accidentally affected in their battle, then Lin En would be in trouble. Seeing the golden threads in the sky being manipulated by Lin En's hands, like puppeteers controlling their puppets, they turned into alchemical arrays. Fleur and other knowledgeable young wizards at Bogsburton's School of Magic all cried out in surprise. Madame Maxim, who was a senior alchemist herself, was even more amazed. She had created nearly 10 alchemical arrays in just a few seconds, and she did it without a wand. Even Madame Maxim herself couldn't do it. As for the young wizards at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Durmstrang School of Witchcraft, they were also exclaiming in surprise, but they were only surprised that Lin En had summoned so many golden threads without a wand. They didn't know that the golden lines on the golden eggs were alchemical arrays. At this time, after noticing the alchemical arrays under it, the Hungarian horntail was shocked and angry. It thought that Lin En was attacking its children. So, the Hungarian horntail immediately roared in anger and flapped its dragon wings towards Lin En. "I'ma protect yourself." Looking at the Hungarian horntail flying towards him, Lin En raised his right hand calmly and released a wandless armor spell. With the blessing of the Philosopher's Stone, the armor spell was filled with a large amount of magic power, and the originally invisible magic barrier actually splashed waves in the air. The Hungarian horntail threw its entire body on the invisible barrier, but was bounced back by the powerful recoil force. However, the invisible barrier was shattered by the angry attack of the Hungarian horntail. The Hungarian horntail flapped its dragon wings, which were as wide as the wings of a small passenger plane. The intense heat gathered in the mouth of the Hungarian horntail, and the hot magic fluctuation spread out. Even the little wizards in the stands felt the waves of heat coming. Nice wandless spell casting. This is a spell casting method that even adult wizards find difficult to perform. It's simply amazing. Wait, what is that? This Hungarian horntail is going to spray fire at our old warrior. Ludo explained loudly in the stands. When they noticed that this Hungarian horntail was going to spray fire at Lin, almost everyone was worried for Lin. Boom. The Hungarian horntail flapped its dragon wings violently, and its entire body was pushed back dozens of feet by the powerful recoil. A column of fire with a diameter of 3 meters was sprayed out by it. Endless flames roared and swirled towards Lin. The column of fire condensed from the flames in the sky was enough to collapse the entire Hogwarts castle. However, such a terrifying column of fire was bombarded towards Lin, a little wizard who was like an ant compared to it. Seeing this, everyone stood up subconsciously, and Ludo shouted loudly, "Damn it, he can't withstand this kind of flame. Dragon trainer, save him." In fact, before Ludo shouted this, Charlie Wearlie, who was outside the venue, led a group of dragon trainers to run towards the competition venue, but with their speed, they couldn't intercept the fire column before it hit Lin En. Looking at the fire column, so close to Lin En, almost everyone showed despair, and there was a bit of regret in their eyes. Such a talented little wizard, is he going to die in this damn game? Exclamation mark. Just when everyone thought that Lin En was going to die, Lin En raised his right hand calmly, and the overwhelming fire seemed to be unable to shake him at all. The next moment, a more spectacular and terrifying pillar of fire burst out of the air. The pillar of fire, which was 10 meters in diameter and more than 3 times the size of the Hungarian horntail, burst out from Lin En's palm and bombarded the Hungarian horntail with an even more oppressive momentum. At this moment, the offense and defense changed. Chapter 319. The fierce fire hides in the gubbly fairy fire, and the Hungarian horntail is covered with wounds. Unlike the red flames that the Hungarian horntail spewed out, the flames released by Lin En were actually golden. The flames that were like holy fire collided with the red flames of the Hungarian horntail and actually slowly pressed it back. The golden flames that filled the sky were like burning the sky and boiling the sea, covering the direction of the Hungarian horntail. In front of this golden flame, the red flames spewed by the Hungarian horntail were like child's play, but they were annihilated by the golden flames in a few breaths. Lin En, who was like an ant in front of the huge Hungarian horntail, released a golden flame that defeated the red flames of the Hungarian horntail with an overwhelming advantage, and even continued to press in the direction of the Hungarian horntail in the air, squeezing the opponent's living space. Seeing this incredible scene, everyone in the stands exclaimed. Charlie Wearlie, who had just reached the edge of the paddock, cursed, "Merlin's pants, is this still a human being?" Charlie Wearlie's words were exactly what most people were thinking. You know, even 7 or 8 well-trained dragon trainers with nearly elite aura level had to work hard to subdue this fire dragon. But Lin single-handedly challenged the fire dragon and defeated the opponent in the fire magic that the fire dragon was best at. The most important thing was that Lin was casting without a wand. In the stands, Madame Maxim and Karkaroff both opened their mouths wide. They closed their mouths several times, but they couldn't say a word. Dumbledore smiled at Lin in the competition venue and praised loudly, "Gubbly fairy fire. Good boy." Yes, the golden flame released by Lin was not an ordinary magic flame, but the gubbly fairy fire known as the Eternal Fire. Apart from Dumbledore, I'm afraid only Irina could recognize that this golden flame was gubbly fairy fire. Perhaps many people also knew gubbly fairy fire, but they couldn't convince themselves that the golden flame controlled by Lin En was gubbly fairy fire. After all, let alone the British magic world, even in the entire magic world, they couldn't find a wizard who could control gubbly fairy fire. They didn't believe that a young wizard who was not yet an adult could do what all other wizards couldn't do. At this time, the Hungarian horntail looked at the golden flame that was constantly compressing the length of its red flame and slowly advancing in its direction. A trace of fear flashed in its eyes. It mobilized all the magic power in its body and gathered it in its mouth. Even hotter flames spewed out of its mouth, trying to turn defeat into victory and push the pair of waves of flames towards Lin En. White steam kept coming out of the nose of this Hungarian horntail. Obviously, such a strong flame jet made its body a little overwhelmed. Even though the fire dragon is a magical animal that loves heat and can even control flames, the efficiency of its flame jetting has far exceeded the upper limit of its body's ability to bear. Too much is as bad as too little. Even eating too much can make one die, let alone a flame that can burn everything! Exclamation mark. The black dragon scales near the throat of the Hungarian horntail began to turn red under the high temperature, and its eyes began to gradually become bloodshot. The flames that spewed out of its mouth at high speed almost drained all the magic power in its body. Compared with a Hungarian horntail that was trying its best and struggling to survive, Lin En on the ground was like strolling in a garden. Between his hands, endless flames appeared and attacked the Hungarian horntail in the air with the force of thunder. As if to defeat the Hungarian horntail faster, Lin En clenched his right fist, and the goblet fairy fire that spread in all directions was restrained by an invisible force, gathering towards the center, and finally turned into a flame light column with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. At the moment, when the flame pillar was formed, a black light lit up in the center of the flame pillar, but it was soon wrapped in the golden flame, and could not be seen by outsiders. No one noticed the flash of black light. The little wizards in the stands were so surprised that they were speechless. They seemed to be frozen in place. They couldn't help but start to doubt their lives. Compared with Lin's godlike fire magic, what kind of bullshit did they learn? Exclamation mark. They even suspected that they had learned a fake magic. Not only these little wizards, but also Madame Maxim, Karkaroff and the professors of Hogwarts Castle now widened their eyes and their breathing became heavy. When have they seen such a horrible scene? Even when Dumbledore and Voldemort, the two demon-level wizards, fought each other, there had never been such a grand scene. No matter how hard the Hungarian horntail tried, it could not stop the flame pillar released by Lin from attacking its direction. Soon, the terrifying flames engulfed the Hungarian horntail, and the wailing of the Hungarian horntail continued to come out from the burning flames. With the dragon's affinity and resistance to flames, it shouldn't cry so miserably. Charlie Wheeleye outside the paddock frowned when he heard the hysterical screams and wails of the Hungarian horntail. Dumbledore in the stands also stood up subconsciously. He looked at Lin's direction with a serious look. He finally figured out what the black light that flashed in the golden pillar of fire was. Fire blaze. Dumbledore murmured. He didn't expect Lin to learn the fiery blaze spell privately and be able to control it so well. You know, the fiery blaze itself is not a real flame, but a cursed power that exists in the form of flames. This is why he didn't allow Lin to learn the fiery blaze in the first place. Now, not only did Lin En perfectly control the fiery spell, but he also released the fiery spell hidden in the goblet fairy fire under the gaze of hundreds of thousands of eyes. This ability to control fire was simply unheard of. With the affinity and resistance of fire dragons to fire, even if the Hungarian horntail was soaked in magma, it would probably feel very comfortable like soaking in a hot spring. And the only fire in the magic world that could make fire dragons wail in pain was the fiery spell. However, Lin En's original intention was not to torture or kill the Hungarian horntail. He just wanted to defeat it at a faster speed. Therefore, after his flames annihilated the flame spewed out by the Hungarian horntail and engulfed it, he waved his hand to let the flames that burned the sky and boiled the sea dissipate like smoke. At this time, the flames in the competition venue were all extinguished in Lin En's thoughts, and the miserable state of the Hungarian horntail was also presented to everyone. The once majestic Hungarian horntail was now a bloody mess, with most of its dragon scales falling off due to the fierce fire, and its throat, which was used to spit flames, was now charred black. Seeing this scene, everyone in the stands exclaimed. Chapter 320, Killing the Hungarian horntail with a nail. Karkaroff looked unhappy. Charlie Wheeleye and other dragon trainers at the edge of the field showed a look of heartache. After all, these were all fire dragons from their dragon farm. At this time, Lin En walked towards the Hungarian horntail step by step, ready to take the golden egg. On the other side, the Hungarian horntail looked at the demon that summoned the terrifying flames and injured itself like this, and walked towards it. It became restless and raised its claws as if it wanted to fight to the death with Lin En. The Hungarian horntail opened its mouth, but did not dare to spit out another breath of flame. It knew that its flames were no match for this short demon, so it planned to defeat the opponent with its strong body. Oh, are you still going to resist? Seeing the action of the Hungarian horntail, Lin En chuckled and opened his hands outward. Countless golden threads flew out from the palms of Lin En's hands and quickly intertwined into alchemical arrays in the air. In less than a minute, 3 alchemical arrays stood beside Lin En. At this time, the Hungarian horntail had flapped its wings, flew into the air, and swooped towards Lin En. Bang! Facing this huge dragon as big as a hill, Lin En did not look worried at all. He raised his right hand, stretched out his thumb and index finger to make a pistol shape, and then shook it gently, simulating the sound of shooting, just like those naive muggle children. However, no one would underestimate Lin En's every move. When Lin En's right hand made the action of shooting, the sense of crisis in the heart of the Hungarian horntail reached its peak. The next moment, golden beams burst out from the 3 alchemical arrays. The beams like meteor showers shot towards the direction of the Hungarian horntail. These golden beams even reserved advance when they were fired, so that most of these beams hit the Hungarian horntail. Under the bombardment of hundreds of golden beams per second, the Hungarian horntail could not get close to Lin En at all. It could only keep swinging its body to try to avoid the damage of these golden beams. Every 10 or so golden beams that hit the Hungarian horntail would shatter one of its black dragon scales. In less than a minute, hundreds of dragon scales of this Hungarian horntail were shattered by Lin En. In order to save itself from suffering, it quickly landed on the ground. However, it had not given up the idea of killing its enemy, Lin En. It stood on 2 legs and raised its dragon claws to cross in front of itself, resisting the golden beams from the 3 alchemy arrays while running towards Lin En. The size of this Hungarian horntail was so huge that every step it took shook the entire competition venue. Seeing this, Lin En also raised his left hand. Hellfire martial arts. Lin En shouted, and a golden goblet fairy fire ignited on Lin En's left hand, and under Lin En's control, it madly compressed and collapsed inward, and finally turned into a flaming spear. The flaming spear was 10 meters long, but it seemed to have no weight in Lin En's hand. He held it tightly. Looking at the Hungarian horntail flying in the distance, Lin En recited an obscure spell. Soon, a ball of light grey magic appeared in front of Lin En, and was stuffed into the flaming spear by Lin En. The next moment, the flames burning on the flaming spear disappeared instantly, turning into a black spear as black as ink. After holding the black spear, Lin En suddenly jumped up. With the help of the silent and wandless floating spell, he jumped to a height of more than 10 meters, even higher than the audience in the stands. Lin En looked down at the Hungarian horntail below. He threw the black spear in his hand and shouted, "Fire all the bullets." As Lin En's voice fell, the black spear, that was originally falling at a moderate speed, suddenly shot out like an arrow, leaving only a residual image on the spot. Swish! The tip of the black spear ignited a golden flame, and even spewed out a golden spearlight of about 2 inches. The 10-meter long black spear pierced the direction of the Hungarian horntail with the force of thunder. In less than a breath, the black spear burning with golden flames pierced into the abdomen of the Hungarian horntail, broke its flesh and blood, and came out from its back, nailing it to the ground. Under the powerful impact, the Hungarian horntail was nailed to the ground by the black spear, and could not move. The Hungarian horntail kept wailing and struggling, but its entire body was nailed to the ground. Even if it tried its best, it only made the wound pierced by the spear expand, increasing the pain, but unable to get rid of it. After nailing the Hungarian horntail to the ground, Lin En ignored it, but used the levitation spell to slowly land on the ground, and walk towards the direction of the golden egg. Under the gaze of thousands of young wizards in the stands, Lin En came to the dragon's nest, where the golden egg was placed. With a wave of his hand, he removed the alchemy array that sealed the nest, lifted the golden egg up, and held it high above his head. However, at this moment, the stands were silent. Everyone was stunned by Lin En's extraordinary move. The flame suppressed the fire dragon, the golden beam swept the fire dragon, and finally nailed the fire dragon to the ground with a spear. Any of the things Lin En did were shocking enough. Good. At this time, Dumbledore stood up again, clapping hard and shouting loudly. Dumbledore's voice woke up the others. Suddenly, the whole venue was filled with thunderous applause. The cheers that broke out almost overturned the entire stand. Melon's lace stockings. I'm honored to witness the birth of a future rising star in the magic world. To be honest, when Mr. Owl told me that he didn't need a wand, I thought he had hysteria, but now it seems that the person with hysteria is probably me. Okay, now please ask the referee to score. After the cheers of the little wizards gradually subsided, Ludo Bagman raised the microphone and said with a sigh. As Ludo's voice fell, the little wizards finally turned their attention to the referees. Each referee can give a score of no more than 10 points. These little wizards are very curious about what score Lin En can get. At this time, Madame Maxim raised her wand, and a silver ribbon like magic spewed out, forming a score of 10 points in the air. Seeing this, the little wizards cheered again. After Madame Maxim came Old Barty, who also gave a 10. Then came Dumbledore, who gave a 10 without hesitation. And Ludo Bagman, who was shocked, naturally gave a 10 without any doubt. Now only Karkaroff was left without a score, and everyone's eyes were focused on Karkaroff, wondering how he would rate Lin's performance. However, Karkaroff's face was livid at this time. He glanced at Lin with an unpleasant expression, raised his wand, and a small 4 score appeared in the air. Chapter 321. You gave yourself the face, don't be pretentious. Seeing the crooked 4 points floating in the air, the whole stadium was in an uproar. Whether it was the little snakes of Slytherin, the little wizards of other colleges, or even the little lions of Gryffindor, they all cursed loudly at this time. Although Gryffindor and Slytherin were not on good terms, Lin En was a warrior of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry after all, and they were really shocked by Karkaroff's shamelessness. It's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. I demand that this blind referee be replaced. Give your mother a bunch of bullshit points. Get out if you don't know how to give points. You gave Crumb a 10 for his performance, but you gave R all 4 for holding down the dragon. Do you have the nerve to do that? Karkaroff, you biased bastard. Karkaroff, get out. Karkaroff, get out. Almost all the young wizards in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and even some in Bogsburton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, were cursing Karkaroff for being shameless. At first, everyone was cursing at their own expense, but later everyone's words became a uniform Karkaroff, get out. At this time, the young wizards in the formation of Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry also felt a little blushing. Their principal's behavior was a bit excessive in their eyes, which made them, as Karkaroff's students, feel ashamed. Even Crumb, who was beaten 10 points by Karkaroff, now covered his face and turned his head away, unable to bear to look directly at his headmaster. Seeing himself being scolded by a group of little wizards, Karkaroff suddenly felt a little embarrassed. He put his wand against his throat, cast a loud voice spell, and shouted, "Shut up." The deafening sound spread throughout the stadium. The thunder-like explosion stunned the little wizards in the stands. They stared blankly in the direction of Karkaroff, and stopped scolding for a while. Before the little wizards could react, Karkaroff said with a specious argument, "I have a reason to give the role warrior 4 points. The goal of the first event is to get the golden egg, but the role player put a lot of energy into the battle with the fire dragon, and spent a lot of time on it. This runs counter to the goal of this game. Although Lin En got the golden egg intact, he got the golden egg the last among the 4 warriors, so it is reasonable for me to give the role warrior 4 points. In addition, students are requested to respect their teachers and be polite to professors." Karkaroff said nonsense, and in the end he even preached to the little wizards from the 2 magic schools in the stands with a sanctimonious look. As Karkaroff's voice fell, the entire stand suddenly fell silent, and almost everyone was stunned by Karkaroff's shamelessness. The time it took Lin to get the golden egg was less than a minute longer than the other 3 warriors, but Karkaroff could bring up this insignificant time to make a fuss. Moreover, the other warriors had to roll and crawl to avoid the dragon before they could get the golden egg, while Lin only took less than a minute longer to nail the dragon to the ground. Isn't it clear who is stronger and who is weaker? Exclamation mark. But Karkaroff could bring it up to make a fuss, and he looked reasonable. You gave yourself a face, don't be a bitch, and pretend to be a saint at the same time. At this moment, a delicate shout came from the Gryffindor square, which once again ignited the anger of the little wizards in the stands. That's right, don't be so shameless. Karkaroff, you better have some shame. Get out of here, Karkaroff. These little wizards no longer cared about Professor Karkaroff's identity. They cursed loudly, searching their minds for all the words that could be used to insult people, and sprayed them all on Karkaroff. Looking at the little wizard who didn't buy his tricks at all, Karkaroff's face turned pale and blue. He was so angry that he refuted loudly with the sound loud spell, but his voice was still suppressed by the angry curses of the little wizards. Obviously, Karkaroff's serious bias and unfair behavior aroused the anger of these little wizards. Please be quiet. At this time, Dumbledore stood up, pressed his hands down, and said, although these little wizards were very angry about Karkaroff's behavior, they still had to give face to the respected Dumbledore. They all quieted down and cast their eyes on Dumbledore. Dumbledore did not disappoint them. He just said loudly, Since everyone thinks that Professor Karkaroff's scoring is unfair, then I will cancel the validity of Professor Karkaroff's scoring of Lin En on behalf of the organizers of the Triwizard Tournament. The voting rights that originally belonged to Professor Karkaroff belong to you. How about it? Please use your wands to hit your head to score Lin En. We will take the average of everyone's scores as the score of Lin En in this first project. Okay, everyone can start. Dumbledore said loudly. Hearing Dumbledore's words, almost all the little wizards cheered loudly, and they also raised their wands and hit a number on their heads. The whole stand is now full of 10 points. Even some first year little wizards who can't cast magic to score, after consulting seniors in the same college, hit a 10 points crookedly under the enthusiastic guidance of seniors. While these little wizards were celebrating, Karkaroff came over with a sullen face. He growled, "Dumbledore, what do you mean? Why do you deprive me of the right to score? Don't forget, you are just a referee like me." Hearing this, Dumbledore smiled slightly and said, "Human power is great, Karkaroff. Although they are just students, their combined strength is something that even I dare not ignore. You have aroused public anger, Karkaroff. You should be clear about this." Karkaroff sneered and said, "So what? Dumbledore, don't make alarmist remarks here. They are just some underage little wizards. Why do they contradict me, the principal of Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry? Are all the students of your school so uncultured? Moreover, you haven't answered me yet. Why do you deprive me of the right to score? What qualifications do you have to do this?" While Karkaroff was confronting Dumbledore, Ludo and old Barty came over from not far away. "Professor Karkaroff, since you said so, Mr. Crouch and I, on behalf of the Ministry of Magic and the organizers of the Triwizard Tournament, will cancel the validity of your scoring this time. In addition, if you are still biased in the scoring process of the second event, then we will disqualify you from serving as a referee," Ludo Bagman said lightly. Chapter 322, The IQ of a Girl in Love is Negative. Karkaroff looked at Ludo and old Barty who were walking towards him, and was choked for a moment. He pointed at the two of them, but could not speak. On the other side, the results of the young wizard's scores had come out. Almost all the young wizards from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and Bogsburton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry gave Lin a score of 10. Even the young wizards from Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry admired Lin's magic level in fighting the dragon alone, and gave Lin a score of 10. Even if some young wizards from Durmstrang School of Witchcraft and Wizardry who were resentful of Lin because their principal was insulted, gave Lin a low score, their scores were mostly ignored. Even if their malicious scores were averaged together with the scores of others, Lin's score was above 9.8. Therefore, after Ludo Bagman finished counting the scores of the young wizards, he announced that Lin's score was 10. With the previous scores from Dumbledore, Madame Maxim, Ludo and old Barty, Lin's total score has reached 50, and he is leading the Warriors with a perfect score. After learning of Lin's perfect score, the stands were boiling again. These young wizards boasted about Lin's magic level, and some even felt proud to know Lin, even if they just talked to Lin. At this time, in the Gryffindor formation, Ron and Hermione looked at Irina in amazement. Ron couldn't help but say, "Irina, you are so brave that you insulted Karkaroff in person." Fortunately, they couldn't stand the pressure of public anger and revoked the validity of Karkaroff's score. Otherwise, if they found you out, you would be in trouble. Hearing this, Irina raised her head proudly and said, "Humph, Lin En did so well, and even killed the fire dragon alone. Karkaroff deliberately gave him a low score. He is mentally ill. What I said is the fact. What's wrong with it?" Yes, it was Irina who scolded Karkaroff in the stands for wanting to be a bitch and a saint at the same time. When Irina saw Lin En nailing the fire dragon to death on the field with such a domineering attitude, and taking the golden egg easily, her eyes were full of stars. But now Lin En's results are completely denied by Karkaroff's words. How can she accept it? Exclamation mark. Seeing Irina's look of defending Lin to the death, Ron and Hermione couldn't help but hold their foreheads, shook their heads and sighed. Sure enough, the IQ of a girl in love is negative. After the first event, Lin and others were asked to return to the tent to get information about the next event. Seeing Lin leave the competition venue, Charlie Wearlie, who was at the edge of the venue, hurriedly ran into the venue with a group of dragon trainers and came to the Hungarian Horntail. Charlie touched the wound of the Hungarian horntail with a distressed look. These dragon blood and dragon scales are very expensive magic materials. These are the money of the dragon farm. But now, this money has been wasted by Lin. Charlie, this Hungarian horntail seems to be still alive. Just as Charlie was silently picking up the relatively intact dragon scales on the ground, a dragon trainer said in surprise. Hearing this, Charlie immediately stood up and hurriedly checked the Hungarian horntail. Under the detection magic, although the Hungarian horntail had no movement, it seemed to still have a breath left. If it was treated in time, it might be saved. Siri, use magic to protect its body. I will take out the black spear. Charlie said loudly to the dragon trainer, and he climbed onto the body of the Hungarian horntail. The dragon trainer named Siri waved his wand quickly, and a golden film wrapped the part of the Hungarian horntail that was in contact with the black spear, ensuring that the black spear would not cause more serious injuries when it was pulled out. After Siri cast the spell, Charlie struggled to pull out the 10-meter-long black spear. Looking at the black spear stained with dragon blood, Charlie couldn't help but feel horrified. He had never imagined that Lin, who had come to his home as a guest, would be so powerful. On the other side, Lin, Harry, Fleur and Crumb had returned to the tent. Lin, you are so amazing. No wonder you said you don't need a wand. I think you can compete with Professor Dumbledore. Fleur looked at Lin with stars in her eyes. She said incredulously. Harry also looked at Lin in shock, speechless. Even Crumb, who was always gloomy, stared at Lin with an indescribable look, as if he was not looking at an underage wizard, but a human-shaped beast. At this time, Ludo Bagman also walked into the tent. He said to everyone, "You all did a good job. Very good. Well, I only have a few words to say. The second project will start at 9:30 AM on February 24th next year. Before that, you can rest for a long time. But we have to leave some questions for you to think about. Look down at the golden eggs in your hands, and you will find that they can be opened. See the seams there? You must solve the clues provided in the eggs, which will tell you what the second project is. You can get ready. Is everything clear? No problem? Okay, you can go." After explaining the second project, Ludo signaled that everyone could leave. So, the four of them filed out of the tent. Just as Lin En passed through the grove and was about to find Irina, a figure in bright green clothes blocked Lin En's way. The owner of this figure was Rita Skeeter. She was holding a shorthand quill pen, looking at Lin En with a smile, and asked, "Congratulations on becoming the first Triwizard Tournament warrior in history to get a perfect score in a single event, Mr. All. Excuse me, can I ask you some questions?" Originally, Rita came here to interview Harry Potter again. After all, the previous report about Harry received a very good response in the Daily Prophet, which made her very happy and couldn't wait to get the second report. However, after seeing Lin En's performance in the first project, Rita Skeeter immediately changed her mind. Compared with the explosive news that one person nailed a fire dragon to the ground, the love history of the savior was not up to the standard at all. Hearing Rita's words, Lin En readily agreed. However, when Rita took him aside and prepared to start the interview, Lin En's expression suddenly became indifferent. Lin En said in a cold tone, "Miss Skeeter, if you really want to interview me, then I suggest you put away the shorthand quill. Otherwise, if I see some unrealistic reports about me in the Daily Prophet, I think, with the power of the Royal family, it may not be difficult to ban a reporter." As Lin En's voice fell, Rita felt a chill that penetrated her heart and spread throughout her body. She knew that what Lin En said was true, and the Royal family really had this ability. Chapter 323 Christmas Ball. You can't do this. You use the power of the Royal family just to ban a small reporter. Is this the demeanor of a pure blood family? Rita subconsciously stepped back a few steps. She said in a timid manner, but she put away the shorthand quill pen from the bottom of her heart. Lin chuckled and said, "Maybe you will write Professor Dumbledore as a rigid old lunatic, but sorry, I'm not." Hearing Lin's words, Rita's face turned pale. She knew the subtext of Lin's words very well. Maybe Dumbledore would abide by some rules in order to maintain the existing order. He would rather suffer injustice than break the rules to deal with her, but Lin was different. He might not abide by the rules. The magic world always respects strength. If Rita Skeeter was asked to insult Grindelwald and Voldemort, even if Grindelwald had been imprisoned in Nuremberg and Voldemort had been killed, Rita Skeeter would never dare to do so. Why? Isn't it because the two Dark Lords have the power of a demon-level wizard that they want to kill Rita, a reporter, as easy as crushing a small insect? Even though they have fallen, their residual power can still shock people. And why did Rita dare to say bad things about Dumbledore, who is also a demon-level wizard and even defeated Grindelwald in the report? Isn't it because Dumbledore is willing to abide by the rules? His kindness and compliance make a little person like Rita have extra thoughts? Exclamation mark. Rita saw how Lin En nailed a Hungarian horntail without any damage in the competition venue. If Lin En is unwilling to abide by the rules, then let alone the power of the Roll family, even Lin En himself can crush her to death with one hand. After all, Rita doesn't think she is more powerful than a Hungarian horntail. After figuring it all out, Rita stuffed the shorthand quill where Lin couldn't see it. She smiled flatteringly. "Don't worry, Mr. Roll, I'm a reporter. It's my duty to tell the truth and write the facts. I can guarantee that there won't be any negative news about you, Mr. Roll, in the Daily Prophet." Looking at Lin's half smile, Rita lowered her head. She took out a roll of parchment and an ordinary quill and hurriedly began the interview. "Mr. Roll, how do you feel when facing a fire dragon? Do you feel nervous?" Seeing Rita so sensible, Lin smiled and replied, "Not nervous, on the contrary, a little excited. Perhaps dealing with a fire dragon without a wand is a very dangerous and even life-threatening act in the eyes of most wizards, but in my eyes, this is the best way for me to hone my own strength." Rita continued to ask, "Then, Mr. Roll, do you think the referee's scoring, the referee's scoring, is it fair?" Lin En smiled and replied, "Whether the referee's scoring is fair or not, as a contestant being scored, I don't think I have much say. But the public's eyes are sharp. I think the public will give an answer to your question." Hearing this, Rita smiled knowingly. Will the public give an answer? The public anger in the stands even forced Dumbledore to stand up and let everyone scold Lin En to calm people's anger. Isn't this answer already beyond doubt? Exclamation mark. After asking these two questions, Rita asked some more questions about the Triwizard Tournament, and Lin En answered them one by one. "Okay, thank you Mr. Roll for your cooperation, then I'll go back first." After interviewing Lin En, Rita bowed slightly to Lin En, and then held the parchment in her hand, as if it were a treasure, and left the woods. Although the interview contents on the parchment were all handwritten by Rita, and not as explosive as those written with a shorthand quill pen, as a warrior who fought a dragon without injury, Lin herself was already synonymous with explosive news. What else could she not be satisfied with? Christmas was approaching quickly, and the white snow covered the Hogwarts castle. Even Merlin changed into thick woolen socks. In the 5th grade transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall looked at the young wizards under the podium. She did not start the day's class, but talked about the Christmas ball. The Christmas ball is coming. It is a traditional part of the Triwizard Tournament and a great opportunity for us to interact with foreign guests. The ball is only open to students above the 4th grade. However, if you like, you can invite a junior student. You must wear your dress robes, Professor McGonagall continued. The ball will be held in the hall at 8 o'clock on Christmas night and end at midnight. Listen, the Christmas ball will undoubtedly give us a chance to let our hair down and relax ourselves. Professor McGonagall looked at everyone and said in a nonchalant tone. But soon, her expression became serious again, and she continued, "But that does not mean that we will relax the behavioral requirements for students in Hogwarts Castle. If a student in our school embarrasses the school in any way, I will feel very sad." After talking about the Christmas ball, Professor McGonagall led everyone into the day's transfiguration learning. Soon, the bell rang, and the little wizards in the classroom put away their school bags and walked out of the classroom. But at this moment, Professor McGonagall raised her voice and shouted, "Roll, please stay for a moment. I want to say something to you." Hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Lin En stopped what he was doing, and he came to Professor McGonagall, waiting for her next words. Looking at Lin En, who was as tall as him, Professor McGonagall couldn't help but show a touch of relief. You know, Lin En has always been very talented in transfiguration, and even joined the transfiguration club he founded in the 1st grade. Although Lin En participated in fewer club activities, Professor McGonagall was able to get new surprises every time Lin En participated in the transfiguration club activities. Maybe Lin En used transfiguration very few times in actual combat, but that didn't mean that his transfiguration was not strong. But his talent in the fields of fire magic and alchemy was too dazzling, so bright that Lin En's talents in other fields seemed to be eclipsed by it. Professor McGonagall looked at Lin gently and said, "Mr. All, according to the traditional practice of the Christmas ball, the dance is opened by the warriors and their partners, so you need to find a partner." Chapter 324 Little Barty is leaving school. Hearing Professor McGonagall's words, Lin was surprised at first, then smiled and said, "Don't worry, Professor, I will find my partner." Professor McGonagall nodded with satisfaction and signaled Lin to leave. She naturally believed that Lin could find a dance partner. The reason why she had to talk to Lin about this matter alone after class was just a formality. After all, they all saw that Lin and Irina were inseparable on weekdays, so they naturally had nothing to worry about Lin. Professor McGonagall did not leave the classroom. Her next class was the Transfiguration class for the 4th year Gryffindor and Slytherin. She also needed to talk to Harry, who was also a warrior, about this matter after the next class. Thinking of this, Professor McGonagall couldn't help but rubbed her eyebrows. In her opinion, it was much more difficult to get Harry to find a dance partner than Lin. A girl as good as Hermione could be treated as a brother by Harry, which showed how slow Harry was emotionally. On the 2nd day after Professor McGonagall announced that the Christmas ball was about to be held, almost all the little wizards in the 4th grade and above signed the application to stay in school for Christmas. They were looking forward to the upcoming Christmas ball, especially the little witches. They dressed themselves up beautifully every day, as if every day was Christmas. They laughed and played in the corridors of Hogwarts Castle. If a boy walked by them, they would burst into a discussion. Although it was still a few weeks away from Christmas, the entire Hogwarts Castle was already filled with a festive atmosphere. People were looking forward to the upcoming Christmas ball. If you look carefully, you can even see some boys or girls practicing dancing awkwardly in many abandoned classrooms in the castle. They are all preparing for the upcoming Christmas ball. During this time, the professors and students of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry showed their desire to impress the guests of Bogsburton's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and Durmstrang's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They seemed determined to show the best appearance of Hogwarts Castle this Christmas. The castle was decorated with lights and colorful decorations. The whole castle was filled with the most beautiful decorations ever seen. The handrails of the marble staircase were hung with icicles that never melted, and the 12 Christmas trees in the hall were decorated with all kinds of small things, including glittering holly berries and live golden owls that kept chirping. The armor in the castle was enchanted. As long as someone passed by, they would sing Christmas carols. However, the appearance of these cold armors singing Christmas carols was particularly funny. These armors only knew half of the lyrics. Filch, the castle manager, had to pull Peeves out of the armor several times, because Peeves always liked to hide in the armor. When the armor couldn't sing, it would make up some lyrics to fill in, but they were all very rude and ugly. In the morning of a week before Christmas, Dumbledore suddenly asked the Phoenix Forks to send a message to Lin and Irina, hoping that the two could go to the headmaster's office. So, the two who were sleeping soundly in bed were forced to get out of bed. After getting dressed, they came to the principal's office one after the other. "Lin, do you know what Professor Dumbledore wants to see us about?" Looking at Lin, who was walking towards her, Irina asked with some doubts. Lin also shook his head blankly and said, "I don't know. Let's go in and ask." After that, Lin walked towards the stone statue outside the principal's office. However, before Lin took out the long list, the stone statue took the initiative to make way, revealing the way to the principal's office. Seeing this scene, Lin and Irina were both stunned. It turned out that as long as Dumbledore knew in advance, they could go in, even if they didn't say the password. Without thinking too much, the two followed the spiral staircase to the door of the principal's office. Irina stepped forward and knocked on the door gently, and the door opened automatically. "Come in, Lin and Irina." Dumbledore greeted Lin and Irina with a smile. He waved his wand and 2 cups of hot tea appeared in front of them. Lin and Irina sat down opposite Dumbledore. Lin asked straight to the point, "Professor Dumbledore, you asked us to come here early in the morning. Is there anything?" Dumbledore nodded and said, "Yes, since we have worked together to make a plan, I have the obligation to inform you of any unexpected changes in the plan." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Lin and Irina's expressions changed, and their eyes showed a bit of seriousness. Irina said, "Professor Dumbledore, please go ahead." Dumbledore didn't mean to keep them waiting. He said in a deep voice, "Just now, Barty Jr. found me and said he wanted to go home for Christmas. It's normal to want to go home for Christmas, but it was Barty Jr. who asked." At this point, Dumbledore seemed to be hesitant to speak. Irina said what Dumbledore wanted to say. "So, you mean that Barty Jr. wanted to leave Hogwarts Castle? Maybe it was Voldemort's instruction?" Lin followed Irina's words and asked, "Are you worried that Voldemort intends to abandon this plan and let Barty Jr. use the excuse of going home for Christmas as an opportunity to get away, so that our plan will fail?" Lin and Irina both frowned at this time. You know, in the original book, there was no such thing as Professor Moody going home for Christmas, but this thing actually happened in front of them. Is it because of the butterfly effect they brought? Then what is Barty Jr.'s purpose? Lin En and Irina were both thinking hard. If Barty wanted to get out of this and give up the plan, they would never believe it. After all, Barty was willing to sacrifice himself for Voldemort's cause. He would not give up the plan because of fear. What's more, Lin En and Irina never revealed to Barty that they knew the other party's identity. Barty had no reason to give up the plan. "Professor Dumbledore, since you are worried that Barty has some special purpose, why don't you not allow him to leave the school?" Irina said. Hearing this, before Dumbledore could speak, Lin En shook his head and said, "No, don't forget that Barty is still Professor Moody at the moment. Professor Dumbledore has no reason to stop Professor Moody from going home for Christmas. If Professor Dumbledore really does this, then we may not be able to stop Barty from leaving school, and it is very likely that Barty will realize that his identity has been exposed. This will make things worse," Lin En said solemnly. Chapter 325 Irina, will you be my dance partner? Dumbledore agreed and said, as Lin said, before Barty realizes that his identity has been exposed, we have no reason to stop him from leaving school for the holidays. Irina said unwillingly, then can we just let him go? Lin said helplessly, there is nothing we can do about it. I just hope that what Barty does after leaving Hogwarts Castle this time will not affect our plan. Even though Lin and Irina were unwilling to sit and wait for death, in order not to hinder their plans, no matter what Barty did after leaving school, they could only accept it with a pinch of their noses. Relax. Seeing that both of them looked heavy, Dumbledore waved his hand and said with a smile, maybe Barty is really just going home for the holidays? Home? Does Barty still have a home? His mother died to rescue him from Azkaban prison in order to replace the prince with a cat, and his father became his biggest enemy and was also in Hogwarts Castle at this time. If you say that Barty is going home for the holidays, I'm afraid even Dumbledore himself won't believe it, right? Exclamation mark. Lin and Irina looked at each other, their faces still gloomy. Seeing this, Dumbledore had no choice but to say helplessly, Lin, Irina, if you keep looking so worried, even if Barty Jr. is stupid, he will be able to sense that something is wrong with you. Don't forget, Barty Jr. will leave school at Christmas. You don't want your worries to be exposed, right? Hearing Dumbledore's words, Lin and Irina had to rub their faces, and then they smiled again, and under the influence of the smiles of the people around them, their mood gradually improved. After the two stayed to drink a cup of tea, Dumbledore said, I have said everything I want to say. If you have nothing else to say, you can leave. Lin and Irina did not stay in the principal's office for long. After saying goodbye to Dumbledore, they returned to the 8th floor of the castle along the spiral staircase they came from. What do you mean? Go back and take a nap? Irina rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked at Lin En beside her. Lin En shrugged and said, we are up now. Let's go to the Black Lake to practice magic. Even though their magic level is already able to beat most auras, they are still a little inferior to a powerful wizard like the Demon King. Improving magic level is not achieved overnight. They can only improve their strength as much as possible day and night so that they can have a better chance of winning in the future. At present, Lin En and Irina have mastered the wandless casting of most offensive magic, as well as the silent and wandless casting of some magic. Their short-term goal is to master the silent and wandless casting of all offensive magic before breaking through the Demon King. If possible, they hope to master the silent and wandless casting of the 3 unforgivable curses before breaking through the Demon King. So, the two left Hogwarts Castle together and walked towards the Black Lake. In this magical world, where physical fitness is generally not valued, there are very few young wizards willing to get up early in the morning to exercise. When Lin En and Irina arrived at the Black Lake, they could see less than 2 handfuls of young wizards. Among these few young wizards, more than half were from Durmstrang School of Magic. There were probably less than 3 young wizards from Hogwarts School of Magic who really got up early in the morning to exercise. Just as Lin En and Irina were about to start practicing magic, a crisp voice came from not far away, attracting the attention of Lin En and Irina. The two turned around and saw a beautiful head of silver hair and skin as bright as moonlight. It was Fleur. "What's the matter, Fleur?" Lin En looked at Fleur in confusion and asked. Fleur came over with some joy, and she said, "Lin, I don't know if you have heard about the Christmas ball. After Madame Maxim announced the Christmas ball, I have been looking for you these days, but unfortunately you are so elusive that I didn't see you even at dinner time." Hearing this, Lin couldn't help scratching his head. Before the first project of the Triwizard Tournament began, he and Irina went to Hogsmeade to buy all chemical materials, and then he immersed himself in the research of improving the time loop formation. Even on the night when the first project was completed, he was doing research in his dormitory. If he hadn't refined an all-chemical array that could shield the outside world from perception, I'm afraid the noise produced by the operation of those all-chemical arrays would be enough to keep his roommates Malfoy and his trio awake. Therefore, he has been devoted to the research of improving the time loop formation these days. He just dealt with the lunch and dinner every day. It was not until last night that he successfully figured out a plan that could slightly increase the concealment and duration of the time loop formation. Lin En had wanted to relax after finishing his research, but things did not go as he wished. Before he could have a good sleep, he was woken up by Dumbledore early this morning. On the other side, after hearing Fleur mention the Christmas ball, Irina couldn't help but get nervous. Damn, how could I forget about the Christmas ball? Irina couldn't help but feel annoyed. These days, Lin En was doing alchemy research, and she spent most of her time hiding in the small world of the suitcase to take care of those magical animals. When there were too many things to do, she forgot about the Christmas ball that Professor McGonagall mentioned that day. I heard that Professor McGonagall said that the Christmas ball would be led by the warriors. Even if they can't go, I can't not go, Lin En said with a chuckle. Hearing this, Fleur showed a hopeful look, and she asked expectantly, "So, Lin, are you willing to dance with me? I mean, as my partner at this Christmas ball, go on stage with me. Think about it, you are a warrior, I'm also a warrior, isn't it just right for us to lead the dance together?" Seeing this scene, Irina's expression became more nervous. She stared at Lin's eyes tightly, and the whole person seemed a little restless. Feeling the abnormality of the little witch beside him, Lin laughed again. He looked at the little witch beside him softly, and then looked at Fleur, and said, "I'm very sorry, Fleur, I already have a favorite dance partner." Hearing Lin's words, Irina finally breathed a sigh of relief. Damn it, she almost let this delicacy steal the house. Fleur was disappointed. She looked at Lin's dark red eyes unwillingly, and asked, "Lin, can you tell me who your favorite dance partner is?" Fleur said. Her eyes were a little wet. Lin En did not answer her question, but turned sideways, looked at the little witch beside him with eyes full of endless tenderness, and asked, "Irina, are you willing to be my dance partner?" End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.